Marshall in the middle.
Look who I'm with, everybody. I'm with Lieutenant Colonel retired Kelly Cole. We're having a good show. This show is sponsored by Penny A. Cox, Esquire, for all your attorney needs. If the popo's chasing you, call Penny. Hey, also bankruptcies. If you have questions about bankruptcies, no matter what state you're in, no matter where you're seeing this, you dial this number and Penny can help you. She knows all the answers. So Penny A. Cox, Esquire. If the popo's chasing you, call Penny. So we're here with Colonel Cole, and I remember him as Jump Master. We were Jump Master buddies together back in the early '90s. We had some amazing. Oh, look there! He's got the hat. There he is, right there. Look at that. Look at that. And unmute and introduce yourself. Tell everybody, give everybody a short introduction to yourself, if you don't mind. Even catch me up, do that if you don't mind. I think we got no. Now you should be good.
Can you hear me?
Now I got you. Yeah.
Hey, brother. Well, no, I mean, first and foremost, I love you, man. It's been quite some time, and for everyone listening tonight, I would just like to say that Will Marshall was one of the most influential men in my entire military career. I don't say that flippantly. I don't say that because he represented Jesus Christ. He was really the first leader in my journey in the military that reflected Jesus Christ by the way he spoke, the way he treated people, and performed his duties, and treated me as an individual. It was very, very, very impactful. And I don't, and I will just qualify all that by saying that without Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, I would not be the man I am today, the father, and just an individual without Jesus Christ. And that was really first reflected through the leadership of Will. How we came to know each other is that he was my jump master instructor. I'll give some background. So I'll get some background there. Will. I retired just in 2017 after a total of 29 years of service. And I was a Mustang, so I had the opportunity to be enlisted for 9 years, 6 months, and then went to OCS, went to the dark side, and retired. Extremely blessed, and retired as a lieutenant colonel working out of Army Central Command. But over 25 of those years were on Fort Bragg and within the airborne community, and so I ended up with a total of 168 static line jumps and 80 halo jumps. I got my Centurion jump master wings in 2001, and so it was an amazing journey as an airborne soldier, working with both conventional forces and special operations soldiers. How I came to, well, I think we'll just jump to it. I quit college. I had the opportunity to go to college. I was already in the National Guard, and I was struggling and didn't know where to go and what to do. And so, as a third generation paratrooper, a buddy and I looked at each other and said, "Hey, we're in the ROTC building," and said, "Hey, let's go join the Army." And sure enough, we drove our car down to Sioux City, Iowa, went into the recruiter center there, and literally the recruiter had his desk up on his feet. He was reading the paper, and we said, "Hey, we want to join the Army." And he threw out some expletives and said, "Get out of my office. I don't need any college kids jerking me around." And we're like, "No, no, no, no." My friend Tom Disberg, he said, "Hey, I want to go to the 18 X-ray program." wants to be an 18 Delta. And I said, hey, I want to join and be an airborne ranger. And he said, are you guys serious? And we did. And so right there in October, actually September of 1990, we signed the paperwork, and I joined the Army, active duty. I came from the National Guard as an infantryman and just went straight to Fort Benning to airborne school during the first Gulf War, and thought I was going to go to the Gulf War, and ultimately ended up at 10th Mountain Division. I came to Fort Bragg, and they said, "Hey, we're not sending anybody else to the Gulf War," and so there were 180 of us at reception, and they sent 60 to 60 to Fort Stewart, 60 to Fort Campbell, and 60 to Fort Drum. And I got selected for Fort Drum, and that was weird in itself because I had left Iowa where there was like 4 feet of snow, went to Fort Benning and Fort Bragg and sent all my cold weather stuff home, and then I ended up at Fort Drum, and there's 4 feet of snow there. I because I had a great PT store, I was selected to be a reconnaissance scout in Triple Deuce, and was there a very short time because we had the option to come back to Fort Bragg after the Gulf War was over. I had some very poor leadership there, and I think I also want to kind of weave within this entire conversation for all those that are listening, how to steward things, like stewarding soldiers, whether it's your life, whether it's whether it's your education, whether I learned within the military under a couple great leaders, that we have to, as leaders, whether we own our own companies, or we are in the military, whatever we're doing, or our own families, we're called to steward them well, and we have to have a plan. um, you know, Actually, the Word of God tells us to, write the plan down, make the plan. Without vision, people perish. And so, understanding where you want to be personally, spiritually, emotionally, educationally, financially, that's so vital. And I never had that. I grew up in chaos. Most people would never guess this, but I had 3 fathers, right? So I grew up in a very chaotic family. My dad, as I said, was a 3rd generation paratrooper, but got actually dishonorably discharged out of the 82nd Airborne back in the 1959. So if you can imagine the time frame back then, okay, you know what? I'm going to share this with you. Well, you'll laugh at this. This is something most people don't even know. So my dad and one of his buddies, my dad was in the 508th, first of the 508th Alpha Company. He went to airborne school in 1958 on Fort Bragg, right when school was here. And him and a friend went down to McCall, South Carolina. And they were at chasing some girls, I guess, and got in a scuffle with some locals, and they called the police. And the local police went to detain him, and they got in a scuffle there. And one of the people he scuffled was the sheriff, but also he was the justice of the peace of that area down there in McCall, South Carolina. And so they got put on the chain gang, and they got one phone call, and his buddy called his unit and they answered. He called his unit and they didn't answer. And I can't imagine dialing a payphone. I mean, you were in the division back when we used to have to carry a pocket of dimes in our and we had to let the staff duty know when we went into Fayetteville, right?
Right.
We were in the division when you weren't allowed cars, right? And you had to get permission to get married, all those types of things. Really old school Army. And and so he ended up about his buddy, after about 2 weeks on the chain gang, his unit came and picked him up, and he's like, hey, telling his buddy, remember me? And lo and behold, about 25 days into the chain gang, his unit came and picked him up. But back then, they had considered him AWOL, a deserter, and he was a sergeant, and got put on KP, until they worked everything out because he was. And long story short, he got in a fight with another NCO that was kind of harassing him while he was on staff duty, and doing his punishment, and yeah, and so he got kicked out of and he went down to be a wannabe Hell's Angel, and met my mom when she was a table dancer, right? And so I'm the product of that, and I grew up in chaos, and um, my second father, my first stepfather, I would say, was a guy there within the town, and he would end up dying of an overdose, in the bathtub, at 35, and then, again, my mom would get married, and so a lot of my until I accepted Jesus Christ and got some inner healing, I would say that I was always very performance oriented. I'm trying to earn people's respect. I had anger issues. I had alcohol, very young age, I was a functioning alcoholic. And so um, the reason I was able to go to college, I was play football at the university because I was violent. I was angry all the time, chip on my shoulder. And so I took that aggression out on the field, and so, but because I had no sort of mentorship, no sort of balance in my life, I couldn't, so I just ran away to the Army. I knew that I could um, do well in the Army because it was easy. It was easy. The Army's written at a sixth grade level. Um, you just have to, show up at the right place at the right time, be in the right uniform with your ID tags and ID card, pen and paste, and watch, and you're good to go. You know, and yeah, I ended up leaving Fort Drum. Here's another great story how I came to the 505th Infantry Parachute Regiment. My platoon sergeant in the 10th Mountain had said, "Hey, take this letter of recommendation and go down Ardennes and go to the units and say, hey, I want to get a letter of acceptance to your scout platoon." Right. And so if you can imagine, and you knew Sergeant, young Sergeant Cole back then. So imagine me showing up at 82nd reception. I'm in my winter BDUs because I've not been issued any summer weight because I was up in I've got polished uh, jump boots on and a leg cap and a briefcase, and I'm walking up Ardennes. And well, back then at Ardennes is you had the second of the 505, right? Because you had the artillery units at the end of the into Ardennes, and so the first battalion was second of the 05, and they were locked. That building was locked tight. So I walk across to first of the 505th. I walk inside, and I'd say, and me being a PFC, I'm like, I'd like to see the sergeant major. And the staff duties in E6, and he's like, "Excuse me, private?" I was like, "Yes, I'd like to see the sergeant major." He's like, "What unit you with?" And I'm like, "I don't have a unit." And this big old master sergeant comes out of the ops. He's like, "What do you want, private?" I'm like, I showed him the letter of recommendation, and I said, "My former platoon sergeant's like, go up Ardennes and find a unit and say, hey, I want to be a scout." And he's like, "You want to be a scout?" And I'm like, "Yes, yes, I was a scout and I want to be a scout." He's like, "Well, and so what he did was he's like, "Well, they're in the field right now." And I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "Where are they at?" And he's like, No, you can't go out in the field and find them." I'm like, "Well, what are they doing?" And they're doing land navigation. I was like, "Well, I'll find them." He's like, "No, private." Yeah. And so long story short, he gives me a kind of a strip map to the intersection of Long Street and Lamont, and they're out in that area doing land nav. And so I hop in my pickup truck, I drive out there, and he told me, don't park on, the range side, park off the edge like you're a broken down car. And So I entered into the woods, and there's a pickup truck with like a couple of the squad leaders, are hanging around this pickup truck in the back. And I walk up, and I've got my briefcase, and I'm a leg. I knock on the bed of the truck, and they were like, "Holy, who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Private Cole." And I was told by Master Sergeant, you know, uh, the huge guy, come and find you and get a job. And they're like, "Private, what do you?" And long story short, that's how I got my job at. I didn't have to go through scout assessment, selection, or anything, because I literally went out in the woods because I knew how to navigate, and found them. And they looked at my PT card, what was 290, and yeah, and that's how I got my job in the first of 505th. And,
Amen.
huh?
I said, Amen. I love it.
Yeah, it just I didn't know any better. I was just, and because I was 20 years old. I wasn't like straight out of boot camp, and I had been successful. They offered me Ranger School. They offered me Air Assault School up at 10th Mountain if I would stay, but I had a very poor leader. I had literally 15 minutes to make my squad leader and my platoon sergeant had called me down to the platoon CP, told me, "Hey, Sergeant Major wants to see you this morning. Go up to get dressed up and get up there right away." And so I went up to see the Sergeant Major, and he briefed us and said, "Hey, here's your option. We have an option to fulfill your contract, your airborne contract. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And go talk to your platoon leadership." Well, Corporal Close was his name, and he did not know that I was told to go to the battalion area. And so as soon as I crossed what we called the quad, he started smoking me, you know, from inside the building. You know what I mean? Yelling out the window and smoking me and scuffing me up. And so for about 10 minutes, he scuffed me up. And then I didn't even go to the CP. I just got up, went right back into the battalion headquarters, um, said, "Sergeant Major, I'd like to go to Fort Bragg." And that's how that went. And I'll even give a redeeming story there. So 1997, 1997. I had the you've probably experienced this in the Army and its wisdom. PCS me to Fort Drum, right? To literally 10 months later, PCS me back to Fort Bragg. You know, when I could have stayed right at Fort Bragg the whole time. But I think there was a great reason why I went up there, because when I was in processing reception at Fort Drum, I'm an E6 now, right, and had been very blessed with my opportunities at Fort Bragg so far. And if you can, like the hallmark picture, the snow's going down, it's a basketball court, and I'm walking across, and a soldier passes me, and oh, by the way, it's Specialist Close, and I'm Staff Sergeant Cole now. And kind of the way the scenario worked out was, I said, "Hey, Specialist Klaus," and he turned around, and his face went pale because now here it's Staff Sergeant Cole, um, and I had to ask him, because in that time, from when before I met you, to after that, I had accepted Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. And I was really the profanity, the alcohol, a lot of those things that I had struggled with that were limiting me. And I'm not condemning anyone. This is what I'm saying was limiting me from the potential that I had because of these. There were drivers. There were reasons why I turned to alcohol. There was reasons that I was profane and that type of thing. But I had a lot of hatred and bitterness towards um, uh, Corporal Close, Sergeant Close, because of the way he mistreated me as an individual. There's a difference between discipline and being abusive, right? I think the Army's done well in identifying that, has grown in that, but I think that's a leadership thing. Because again, the difference would be instead of using your soldiers, there's a stewarding your soldiers. And that comes with a natural desire to care for them and empower them to have a greater career than you would ever have. See the difference there? There was a machine because we were a training army and we were not in the global war on terror, right? We were in that post-Vietnam era of there was a draconian rigidity of discipline that was going to make us the best in battle. And I believe there were great principles in that. But there was also on the other side, there were some stuff that we went overboard with as a leadership, as a military, and I was part of it. You know, I considered myself to be as hard as woodpecker lips. You know what I mean? Because I could smoke a soldier, as just as good as any NCO back there. And I'll tell a small story about that in a moment. But with I had to stop, close, because he was like, "Holy cow, wow, you done it." I was like, "Hey, wait a second. I need to first and foremost ask you to forgiveness for the hatred and the bitterness I had towards you because of the way you mistreated me. Because what you did wasn't right, because you did it all the time, right? To the point where we had to have an ashtray on the chair, on the corner of our desk in our room every morning. We had to leave our door unlocked because he wanted to come in and inspect at any time. This is just a very controlling, abusive type of leadership that can shell shock a soldier, right? Create a disdain. And so I had to stop him, and I said, and and he was just kind of speechless because he didn't expect that, And I said, and we just left it at there. Um, but yeah, that was a unique opportunity to have that redemption from that season. But back to Fort Bragg. Before I went to Fort Drum, I was in the Scouts. Kind of unique how actually I don't know if I ever shared this with you, how I got to the Jump Master School. So being in the 82nd, being a ranger was everything. You know what I mean? Remember LGOPs, little groups of paratroopers. To be a leader in the division at this, team leader and squad leader above in the infantry brigade, you were supposed to be a ranger. And so I was in the scout platoon, and we had another toxic leader, to the point where, like, my best friend, his official name is William Christopher Todd Nix, but Billy Bad Boy Nix was his name. And we were in the scouts together, in the scout platoon together. And he went to Ranger School before I did. And in mountain phase, he fell on one of the road marches and ended up breaking his ankle. And so again, you remember, and so he washed out of Ranger School, and so now he's a dirtbag. He's stealing air. What good are you? And this is the season before MRIs. There was nuclear medicine, but the whole premise was, um, Motrin, get the profile. 2 weeks. No ruck, no run, no airborne wops. 2 weeks, and suck it up. Well, that occurred, but what happened was his ankle continued to swell and never really healed. And so he ended up going to nuclear medicine and finding out it's broken. So now he gets a cast. And what ended up happening was this platoon sergeant, I won't name his name, but he was a Grenada. He was a Grenada veteran, actually Purple Heart from Grenada, all that, hard, quote, hardcore. and he would kick his crutches. You know what I mean? Um, call him, dirt bag and all sorts of expletives, and when are you going to get out of our platoon? You're no good. This type of stuff. You're wasting a position, and even to the point where we deployed, and he made him put a trash bag over his duct tape a trash bag over his cast and make him deploy. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It just and so Nix was at this time Nix was not feeling very well. He was suicidal. You know what I mean? He couldn't deal with the daily pressure because he was a stud soldier. And I guess I broke one of the cardinal rules because we had an amazing chaplain, because now I've accepted Christ. I actually accepted Christ on a Greyhound bus after going to see my girlfriend, who's now my wife for 32 years, after Ranger School. And so I was on my way and accepted Christ on this Greyhound bus, and really um, um, got some freedom. And now it's kind of like these blinders came off my eyes, and I'm like, I shouldn't be, if I'm gonna uh, you know be a lover of Christ and see how he treated people, right? Because Jesus truly didn't come into the world to condemn people, but that everyone should come and receive his saving grace, right? Um, you know, it's the devil that comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and hurt, and cause pain, and if again, because of the way I grew up, I thought that I was a bad person, that God was going to hurt me and strike me down, and because I did all the things that quote sinners did, but really, it was a lie. He's the liar. The devil's the liar. He's the one who, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, right? And so, we're to be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let our requests be known to God. And I say these things because all the anxiety, all the stress, everything that I had I was getting free from it, because now I had peace. I had a peace that I never really knew. And going into that environment daily, it was like, wow. Back then, we would, again, I truly am grateful for a lot of the men that I served with. Amazing leaders. Like I had a squad leader who was an ex-BUDS instructor, SEAL, in the 82nd, there were guys that were amazing leaders, in 1505 Panther. But there were some that were like, oh wow, okay, um, the Army's different, and I wouldn't have survived. I wouldn't have survived in the military. I would have crossed the line probably, because that's what I learned up doing. But the bottom line is, I was looking for a mentor, and so we had an amazing chaplain named Matt Golf. And the uniqueness of Matt Golf is that he was a infantry officer before he became a chaplain. He had a guidon in his office. He was Ranger qualified, master parachutist, already as a chaplain. And so I'm like, I want to learn. And so, because of the way Billy was being abused, I lived in the barracks at this time in an NCO unit room. And so I called the chaplain up to the platoon CP area upstairs, up into the barracks. And because back then, to go anywhere, you had to have permission, right? You couldn't go to the chaplain's office, or you couldn't go anywhere without letting the squad leader know, without the platoon sergeant know. And so I just said, hey, chaplain, can you come up? I'd like to talk to you sometime. And so he, and that was, bringing the chaplain up into that area, because that, we were, always listening to Alice in Chains and Metallica, and there was a big demon, goat's head with a stagger in its head with a pentagram on the wall. This was the, warrior area. Chaplains don't ever come up here. And I mean, I can tell you that I was drunk on the floor, passed out. Remember there used to be payphones. There was one payphone in the hallway, and have to write on, wait hours to, people would be passed out drunk in the hallways, on weekends. We shoot star clusters out the windows and rappel down the, and all that. The power goes out in the division area, and there's star cluster battles everywhere. Yeah, you hide the stuff up in the ceiling tiles. I mean, you bring the women. If they were bringing women up, I'd sneak my girlfriend, my wife, out on the end of the building, at the door that's blocked off where the CQ is, right? And the brave guys would try to sneak them through the first first floor windows, right? I could anyway. But the point is Chapman Golf came up there, talked to Billy, and what came out of that is I got called into the platoon CP, and basically I was told you can stay within the platoon and suffer the consequences, or you can leave and get an okay NCOER, um, and get a good NCOR. And I was a junior NCO, right? Brand new E5. And so, and that was the threat. And what happened is that very shortly after that, I got called by the sergeant major, directly by the first sergeant, said, "Hey, Sergeant Cole," because I was the re-enlistment NCO, and said, "Hey," first sergeant said, "Hey, I want you to go see the sergeant major." And I thought I was, I thought I was in trouble. And I thought I was in trouble. I didn't know, you didn't ever go see the battalion sergeant major. You know what I mean? And got down there, and he had me in my office. He put me at ease, and he said, "Hey, Sergeant Cole, I want you to know I know what's going on up in the um, platoon, what's happening in the platoon, and I want to offer you an opportunity to represent the battalion down at the Advanced Airborne School. Would you like to?" He's like, "Would you?" He's like, "I think you're up for the challenge. It's going to be hard, but we need somebody from our to go down and represent us." And that's how I ended up. It was basically a stay in this toxic platoon, or get told to leave and go across the battalion to an infantry squad that I, being a scout, you were like, "No, I don't want to be on the line. I want to be a scout." And so yeah, and that's how I came down to the Advanced Airborne School and met you. And
wow.
yeah, for everyone that doesn't know, so Will was my jump master instructor, my turd trainer. So they don't say that anymore, but a turd was a trainee under rigorous development, and I will tell you, it was rigorous development. My fitting and wearing class was 23 8x11 sheets, and I had to memorize that verbatim with thousands of nitnoid pieces of information, like how many turns are on a 7/8 inch mounting screw, in the ballistic helmet, right? Use proper nomenclature, and that's 8 turns, right? Or how many layers to the old ballistic helmet? 17 layers of modular fibrous material, right? And there's 5 at the time. There were 5 manufacturers of the ballistic helmet, but it was sent to 2 manufacturers that put the polymer membrane coating around the edge of the, so silly stuff like that, or how many teeth are on the M1950 weapons case, right? So he was my instructor. And so at the Advanced Airborne School at the time, when you had to study, and then you had to go on the platform during the breaks, and you got again, rigorous development with footballs thrown at you, pop cans thrown at you, whatever could be thrown at you, whatever distraction could be thrown at you while you're answering questions. And obviously, you did not know all the answers, and so therefore you had to find the answers. And again, folks, you have to understand there was no internet back then. And so you had to go to the rigger shed. You had to count the teeth on the, aviator's kit bag. You had to count the stitches because he would not tell me, but he would correct me and say, go find the answer. And that was a 30-day journey. And I will tell you that I had a great partner. I wish he was on, Warren Close. He was what was the other? I was fit and
He
wearing.
was nomenclature.
He was nomenclature, and so we were trainees together, and so we had and some of the information overlapped, and it was a great partner because we could. He took, when he was getting blasted on the platform, I was listening, learning, and it was probably one of the greatest events that season of being a jump master instructor um, because it just taught me a level of the ability to analyze things at a deeper level, to not take for granted when somebody said something or about this that then you could actually go, oh, okay, all right, no, let me really find this out. Let me figure this out and know where to go get the information. And I just want to back up. So for everyone, I just want to say there was always a mantle of leadership on my life. And I also encourage everyone here, find out what your giftings and talents are. Find out what you're good at. Um, like I said, I was in FFA. I was a leader in FFA. I was, leadership. Um, I was actually at 19. I don't know if you knew this, Will. I was a police officer. Right. I was studying criminal justice in college, and um, I did well there. But when I got asked to do ride-alongs, and because I would remember things and assist, they're like, "Hey, would you like to apply and become a part-timer?" And so I literally did all of my back then. Again, you're talking 1989, 1990. I did a lot of my training via VH tapes and test, and the police chief and Sergeant Proctored. And I was I was a police officer for a year before I joined the Army. And so I had this mantle of leadership, and within 18 months of being in the Army, successfully graduated Ranger School, and then instead of sending me to PLDC, they made me a corporal and sent me to airborne school. And so by the time jump master school, and so by the time I graduated PLDC back then, I was already Ranger qualified. I had my EIB. I passed that the first time, and then I went to jump master school as a corporal, and I was the only one in the battalion to pass. And then that gave me drop the points so I could become an E5, and that helped me be a team leader, acting squad leader in the Scouts, and being successful. And but yeah, getting down there and then really learning. And when I met you, I just want to continue to talk on this. Your mannerisms, your tone, the way you spoke to students, interacted with the other cadre, you know, you could tell that there was a level of discipline that you had that some of them didn't. Now, I know that at that time you had been the Division Soldier of the Year, right? By that time, and so that I think also your level of because I had been like soldier of the month, but never like at the brigade, and never competed at that level because I wasn't afforded the opportunity. Just couldn't break away from try and do that. But yeah, so that set a standard, right? That okay, hey, because I did learn that early that um, that if there was standing in formation, if there was somebody that was, and this applies to life now, right? If there's somebody that is doing something better, right? More successful, standing to the front of you, to the rear of you, to the left or right, learn what they're doing, right? Or they're not doing right. and then take that and apply it. Take it and say, okay, how can I apply this to my own process, my own growth, my own ability? Okay, watch out for that landmine. Don't, nope, definitely don't do that, right? And so that that helped. That was very, yeah, it was just amazing. And so then, um, when I know, I don't know if you remember why or how I left the advanced airborne school. I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember, um, about 3/4 away, I was there. Um, I had to retrain. Do you remember that? So,
No, tell the story.
what I don't know if Dan Bennett's watching, but the bottom line is I had a captain. I was grading him on JMPI, and you know how Dan would walk around and kind of evaluate us as jump master instructors.
Right.
Well, what happened was I had graded the um, so he had walked up while I was grading, while he was doing the three jumper JMPI, and he was a day one fail, so he was redoing it. Um, um, and so Dan walked up, and so I'm grading him, and then ultimately he missed more than what was in the deficiencies, and so I told him that he failed, and he went off. He like was being belligerent, and I'm telling him jump master under blah 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 blah, and he's like I caught that, and so I turned to Dan, and I was like, hey, I was thinking I turned to him, and he's an E7. He's the senior guy that he would be like, hey, jump master, you need to call him. But instead, he's like, why are you looking at me? And I was like, jump master. And I was like, hey, if you have any questions, you can go talk to the commander, blah, 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 blah. And that guy ended up getting a retest. But what happened was I ended up have to um, walk the circle again. I had to shadow again. I had to redo Army aviation again. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that or not, but
No.
and so so part of that and so then um, after that, I can't remember. It was coming up for NCOER time, and but I want to tell you that not bitter, right? That I learned an important lesson there, right? Um, always be confident, right? I knew the standard, right? And just because he was a captain and I was a sergeant, um, when in charge, be in charge, right? Maintain. Um, you did nothing wrong, and I think that was part of the process I had to grow in as an individual, is because of that. I want approval, right? I was always looking for approval by doing things very well, right? Trying to do them well, and that I thought, and that was something I got healed from later on, is that I knew that no, yep, I learned from that. And then what would occur is about a year after being in, then basically when I was brought in to do my NCOER, I was told, hey, we it's time for you to move on. And so that was right as we were transitioning to the new facility.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Right before we actually moved some stuff to the new facility, but I left the basically I was told I wasn't going to be moving with the team to the new facility for and that and we were bringing on some new guys at that time, and so that's why Warren was there like another year, I think, and also Doug Dakin, was he already there? I can't remember if he came after with Thornton, but the bottom line is, we added guys when uh, Pappy left, and those guys, Sergeant Brown left. Those guys rotated out, and we were still there. Um, but yeah, yeah, and so unique opportunity there, because I had done well. I had the opportunity to go then LURS and continue the reconnaissance thing. Um, I did a short time. I did reenlist to go CID, That was a kind of a funny thing. Because I wanted to stay in law enforcement, I went actually over to CID um, for a short time, but ended up doing all the on the job training. Got my top secret security clearance, and uh, I was not selected because at that time, if you remember, Somalia had happened, and uh, 11 Bravo 2 and 3 Victor Rangers were getting out of the Army. And so I couldn't get a branch release. And so what did they do? They kicked me back to the line, and I came back to the 1505 because I was always attached to them, assigned to them, attached to the Advanced Airborne School, attached to the Alpha Company 117. And well, I went to the Alpha Company, but the bottom line is they thought I was like a CID plant because my NCUAR that I got from 87th MP detachment was, I as a criminal investigator. And yeah, so after several months there, I got kicked back to the line, and then it was just like, no, we don't want you here. Go to this company, and it was like, oh, hey, okay, hey, and I got a job down there, and was afforded the amazing opportunity to go to scuba school. And you think of that, and that was like what I said, the opportunities, because here you are, you know, um, jump master instructor, you've served in the scouts, you've served on the line in CID, but now, you get this opportunity. And then what happened was, I don't know if you remember, you were in the division at this time. There was one of the soldiers in the LURS, Tatum, had a horseshoe malfunction and passed away, and at GRTC. I was on a water infill team, but and so Sergeant Major England, I don't know if you remember him. He was on the hunt to take out all the leadership. Not, I think it was a cleansing. I think it was really a cleansing because this guy that they had brought over from Third Special Forces Group and was like the OIC, NCOIC of the Halo. He was a bad apple, and so they were cleansing the NCO. So I got pulled back, and then I came up for PCS, and so that's how I went back to Fort Drum. But before that, I had put in for. I had a good friend in the infantry named Tracy Bowers, and literally we were squad leaders, and literally one day on Friday afternoon before release, he's there. Come back Monday morning, he's gone. And it's like, what happened to him? Oh, he's out doing a special training, and lo and behold, 16 weeks later, he comes back to formation as a artillery second lieutenant. He's not, he's in the back of the formation. It's like, what the heck happened to you? And he's like, oh, I went to OCS. And I was like, OCS? He's like, yeah, Officer Candidate School. And I was like, no way. And because I didn't even know about OCS. I knew about ROTC. And that's a funny story. I applied for ROTC, and I did so poorly in college. I had a 1.68 GPA. And but I had 42 credits of college. And so I told you I re-enlisted for CID. I got the college option, and I did college, took a couple and I got my GPA up to 2.0 to try to get a scholarship, right? And they raised it that fiscal year to 2.5. Like, I was like, yeah, no, yeah, I was like, that was crazy. And so I was like, OCS, yeah. He's like, you need 60 college credits, and I ended up having enough college because I did that college on the college option, on my reenlistment with the 42 credits and being, using I can't remember. I didn't do any CLEPs. It was, because you knew how to do map reading, all the correspondence courses that we used to do, and going to PLDC, and BNOC, had the college. Yeah, I don't know about you. I did BNOC in 4 years, 4 months. That's how quickly I was a staff sergeant in the 82nd, because you just ticking right along because you're got the points. It's really what it is. You got the points. What was it like for you with an ADA?
Oh,
Because
it's
you
the
were a stinger,
opposite.
you were a stinger guy, right?
So I was a Vulcan originally, and then transitioned to Stinger, Avenger. About the time that I met you, we were in the transition to the Avenger. But
Okay.
my issue is that with 3 years and 9 months in the Army, I went to the Staff Sergeant Board. So the
Oh wow.
minimum time that you could, I was there, right at the 4 years. I had to go 3 months early, so right when it hit, I would be eligible because of the
But we
points
were
in my
sergeants together. We were
right,
sergeants together. Yeah.
right. But at the points, I stayed an E5 promotable until I had 10 years. I didn't get promoted to staff sergeant until 10 years in the Army.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I was a sergeant for a long, long time. I was a sergeant until May of '97. I got promoted to staff sergeant. Yeah,
Wow.
crazy.
I almost didn't reenlist. You know that? I applied to the North Carolina Highway Patrol and I got selected, but they were like, you're deferred waiting on approval from the state legislation. And I was like, you remember back then, I don't know if they have them now, they had a reenlistment window. And so, you couldn't with the bonus, you had to reenlist 90 days out. And so I was eligible for the uh, airborne ranger option. And so time's ticking, time's ticking, time's ticking. We're like, okay, I reenlist. So I reenlisted in September. Actually, September 19th is when I reenlisted. And then March, I get my letter from the Highway Patrol saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected. Here's your class date." And I was like, I can't go, can't go. I've already reenlisted. I can't go now to be the Highway Patrol. But it wasn't God's will. I think of the, actually, Psalms 37. Right? I want to read that. It says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he may fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand." That's Psalms 37:23-24. And so it wasn't God's will. It wasn't his will that I go ROTC. Um, it, it, I would have, things would have gone well, but it was no, the timing of what he wanted to do and he needed to do in my life. And so, um, left re-enlisted, and what I was going to say about that is when I went OCS, I ended up graduating OCS September of 97, right? I had an October, so the whole process, I had a 1 October ANOC class date for E7. I actually graduated OCS on September 25th and got my last re-enlistment bonus payment on the 19th. It was awesome. It was awesome. I got my $1,800 reenlistment payment at the end of because it came on the 19th, and I didn't forfeit because I got commission on the 25th. But yeah, again, so after I left Fort Bragg, I went PCS'd up to Fort Drum again, and again favor. Our brigade sergeant major was Sergeant Major Manteo, and he was now the division sergeant major of and so when I was PCSing, the brigade sergeant major called him and said, "Hey, just want to let you know," because I knew I wasn't going to be up long because I'd been selected for OCS and had a class date in June. And so I'm like, I'm going there in January and I'm going to be leaving. Is there an instructor job? Is there something like that that I could do? And so I had favor, got up there, went right up, got an appointment, office call with the sergeant major. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to put you down at the Light Fighters Academy and go, and do well out there until you go to OCS. And yeah, so again, the opportunity of being an instructor prior, right? Already knowing Air Force, Army aircraft, Air Force aircraft, understanding LZ, PZ operations, all that stuff, and being able to go right out to Light Fighters Academy and just step in there. And it turned out very well. It was very well. Had a very hard two things I had to learn there. One was uh, get I had suffered an injury actually supporting a Stinger missile team. I broke my foot and got healed from that, but I came in a little overweight to 10th Mountain. Actually, I'd say I rolled in. and and so I got out the Light Fighters Academy, and the first sergeant out there was like, "Hey, you have 30 days." I took the PT test. They wanted us at 290 and above. I was like 278. I literally took the 2-mile run in a sideways wind snowstorm to do the 2-mile run. No lie. We did the push-ups and sit-ups inside an old World War II barracks, and then like, okay, you got to run here's the route for the 2 miles. Like, what? But the bottom line is, and I passed the tape, right? But I didn't pass the weight, right? And so they're like, you have 30 days to lose the weight and get a 290, or you're not going to work out here. And so that got me back into the personal discipline, physical fitness, where I would literally park my bike at work and run home, and then run from my place on post back to work. You know what I mean? From on Reaver Ridge Loop, I'd run all the way out to Light Fighters Academy and ride my bike back, and and got in shape. I lost 28 pounds and got over a 290 in less than 30 days. But you can do that stuff, right? Back when you're 26, 27 years old, right? That's no problem, right? But but that was a great time. And then as a reward, I just say as a reward, they allowed me to because they knew that I was getting ready to PCS, they allowed me to go to air assault school. And so I got to go to air assault school and be the honor grad of air assault school when leaving the 10th Mountain. And you'll like this. On my way back from, you remember the horrific crash at Pope, the Pope crash that we were there for. I was put in for the Soldier's Medal, but didn't. I'm not saying I wanted one. I'm not saying that at all. Lots of people were awarded the Soldier's Medal. But when I was leaving 10th Mountain, I got a letter saying I had to stop by the brigade headquarters on my way to Fort Benning to go to OCS. And so I stopped by, and they gave me a package. And in that package, I received a Soldier's Medal. But it was for action on something else that had occurred a year after the crash. There was a horrible traffic accident, and then again, I just say God's favor. You're not ever seeking glory. You're not seeking self-promoting, because I want to tell everyone here also what I learned from years ago. There was a men's thing called Promise Keepers, and this was really critical. My older brother, my oldest half brother, I say he's half brother. He was in special operations. The whole 18 Echo thing, CAG, but multiple marriages, things like that. And I had, back then you usually there were the divorce rate was very high for those types of things. And I heard this teaching of never sacrifice your family on the altar of your own success. Right. And I was like, wow, because the next progression of being Ranger, Master Parachutist, Scuba, Air, all these things is, oh, I need to go Special Forces, or I need to go Delta Force, go to CAG. And believe it or not, the only reason I didn't try, I failed the PT test. Remember, I don't know if you remember at BNOC, they always got us in the chaplain, gave us the SFOD briefing, and they're like, if you want to take the PT test, it'll be this morning. And so I show up at the PT test, and I did the PT test, but you know what I failed? Can you guess? The crab walk. I failed the my butt touched the I didn't have the strength coordination to so I failed the crab walk. But the bottom line is that I learned that teaching. I made the decision I'm not going to go 18 delta. And so yeah, and so with that I just kind of surrendered. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do any of that, I've had an amazing career so far. I'm going to be an officer, which I never thought I would be able to do. Um, and so I go to OCS, and so yeah, I get the soldier's medal for saving some people's lives on Highway 401. And this is 1997, and the action happened in 1995. October of 95, and here it is, June, June of 97, and I'm going to my brigade headquarters to pick up a manila envelope with a soldier's medal. And so I go to OCS and I just put it in my top drawer of my locker at OCS, and but that again, I'm just using that testimony as God's favor and blessing, because I never knew, I never like, hey, am I getting this? None of that. I just was just drumming right along with my career. And then this is the great thing. I think this is the greatest probably thing that happened in my career, is that we were supposed to I went to OCS and we were supposed to be year group 9801. And and instead we got made 97-5. So if you can imagine a group of we had 6 females, 6 females out of the 80 guys there. But imagine having like 17 special forces, triple canopy guys. You have CW2, warrants, not only logistics, you had a couple logistics, but you had special forces, 26 E6 airborne rangers, you had like 20 E5 airborne rangers, and we weren't supposed to be 97 dash 90, we weren't supposed to be it. And so our cadre was literally AGR, had come off out of the National Guard world, came on active duty to fill our cadre requirement for our class. And we had just a few active duty staff that were covering down to help. And we could run circles around. I'll give you an example. My roommate was a guy named Pete Cranenberg, right? He was the Army selectee for the Hawaiian Army triathlon, right? My first roommate. That's how fit he was, right? Like, swim 3,000 meters in the pool and then run a sub 10, 2 mile, SF SIF team in Europe, amazing guy. My second roommate was an Olympic alternate, 2-time Olympic Greco-Roman alternate, for the U.S. U.S. Army athletic program. That's how the caliber of the individuals, it was tough being his roommate, because I ran into Pete several times. He named his son Thor. That's how, just see one of his sons named Thor. He was amazing. We were one, and one of the senior cadre was like a West Point West Point graduate. She could run amazing. She could run, and we'd be running, and she'd be like, "Cranenberg, are you sweating yet?" And he's like, "Actually, we're running so slow, the condensation's gathering on my chest." You know what I mean? He was just, and he was meticulous, like OCD across the chart. He could make dress right dress. And so all of the demerits in the room, all the tours that were given were always given to me because nobody could match him in his ability to perform. And so I say that when it came to issuing branches, right? So we were the very last group of individuals commissioned for the year group 97. So we just didn't get what was the bottom of the barrel. We were like what was under the barrel that they could dig up, right? And so you literally had special forces guys getting finance. You know what I mean? Um, Ordnance. Cranenberg, because he was, one of the top guys, he got intelligence, right? He would actually be one of the first guys to ever command and then, a Lurch company as an intelligence officer in the 10th Mountain. Amazing, amazing individual. But the point I'm making is, and so not even in my top 10, I got branch quartermaster. Logistics. I had no clue what quartermaster was. I had to look it up in the Army Officer Guide. And I think the only saving grace was that there was a sword and an eagle in the crest back then. I was like, oh, okay, logistics, quartermaster, supply. Wow. And but again, I would tell you that that was the greatest thing that happened to my career because I didn't understand, and I'm still amazed by it, that for every one warfighter, there's four support for four people behind them that enables them to be able to do their job. And this is why we absolutely, along with our NCO Corps, why we absolutely have the best, unequivocally best military in the world, is because of our the commitment of our government to supply, train, and equip. I know I said that twice, but to our military, our Department of Defense, and our national elements of national security, and so going, graduating OCS, going to the officer basic course. I would also say that multiculturally, socioculturally, being able, had not had a lot of experience working with females, and other, that helped. That's tremendously helped. Also, and it really began to help my communication skills because, being an infantryman, my last, list assignment, being a pre-ranger instructor, counseling, all of that, you've done good, keep, your uniform look good, keep doing good, it just, the way we wrote, the way we communicated on the line, those types of things, there was no real push towards that. And being able to effectively communicate between, being able to say, I need 1,000 widgets of this and 100,000 widgets of this is, can be, where we need it on time, how, for who, all those things required a great deal of growth. And then, again, I would back to that God orders our steps. I was assigned, like I said, I was assigned right back to Fort Bragg, but I had the option. I was told I'm going to go to Korea or I'm going to go to back to Fort Bragg. They want you in Korea, and I'm like, no, I don't want to go to Korea, because there was a lot of things that I was still dealing with as a man, growth I needed, and I was like, no, I don't think Korea would be the best for me, and so. God in his grace and mercy assigned me to the multinational force and observers in Egypt, right next. And literally, I say this, God literally took me to the backside of the desert to Sinai, Egypt, to mold me into the man that the husband, the father that I really needed to become, for the later successes that would be asked of me, as a as a man, not only as a soldier leader, but as a husband, as a father, friend, counselor, minister of the gospel. Um, and so, yeah, he took me there, and there's a woman, captain, at the time, captain. She retired as, I believe, Lieutenant Colonel, Nancy Jo Newell. She had four brothers who were. She was a West Point graduate. Four brothers who were lieutenant colonels. Her dad was a retired colonel, and she was. Again, I would just use. She was the ethos of woman warrior. She was, all, you know, very, very professional, right? But she was also, um, a mother, womanly. I don't know how to describe it. She wasn't, and so she was able to, and because of the op tempo too, right? Because I'd never been a logistician. Um, I'll give you an example. You really chuckle at this. So I get my first assignment is a uh, $10 million, 6,000 line multi national warehouse, right? And so I'm the accountable officer. So I'm punitarily liable for all of the cost of goods within this. I'm the supply officer. And um, and so we have to do 10. And I have an amazing platoon sergeant. I learned this. Um, you know, listen to your NCOs. You know, he will save your life, and he will save money from leaving your pocket. And so, um, so Sergeant Dozier, so we get this truckloads of water in, right? This bottled water, because this is Egypt, right? This is Egypt, and it's gets into the hundreds and twenties, and you know, bottled water is the approved water. You don't, um, and so, and so the truck pulls up, and it's like, Sergeant Dozier's like, hey, we need to offload the water. And I'm like, Mr. Ranger, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Follow me. Start climbing up on the pallets, and cutting things off. And Sergeant Dozier's like, hey, LT, you got a phone call. I'm like, Sergeant? He's like, yeah, come here. And he grabs me and he's like, hey, walking towards the office. He's like, hey, you've got 30 some soldiers that can do that. And oh, by the way, we have forklifts. And and same thing. So they're at it, about 40 minutes into it, and and about half the truck, first three trucks, are unloaded. And I'm like, what are they doing? It's not done. He's like, hey, sir, it's 115 degrees out on the pavement, and we take breaks, because if we burn them out and they get, heat stroke or whatever, it's like, because in the infantry, you're like this. Hey, I need 1,000 sandbags. Oh, Roger, sir. And and we do it and it's done, right? Hey, Sergeant, what do you need? What do you need us to do? Okay, we need to go over here. Roger, Sergeant. Can we eat now? Yeah, in a moment. Clean weapons first. That mindset, right? And so Sergeant Dozier was consistently like, hey, sir, I knew the signal. Hey, sir, you gotta come here. But then there were things like, hey, we need to go pull weeds, or we need to do stuff like that, and it was okay. But I really had to learn how to transition in leadership, to let go and trust your subordinate leaders, because again, in the infantry, there's always a lot of micromanagement, because and again, not beating them up, but I think because we're not a wartime military, and so everything was about appearance. Everything was about, dress right dress. What's my, uh, what's my 6-week training plan? What's the quarterly training brief? What is my status? I think it was all that. And then, but learning there in the desert how to really trust. And then I said the communications part because I had to start doing memorandums, really doing Army writing. And the executive officer for the battalion, I can't remember her name, but she was a former English professor at West Point. And so my Captain Newell had red ink and the major had green ink. And so it was like my memos were like Christmas trees. And oh, by the way, it was almost a half mile from the battalion headquarters and so ride my bicycle, because you couldn't drive, and then finally they let me have a computer in my office. I got permission to move my computer to my hooch, where I was staying, so I could do the memos there. So it was less of a track, to get the memos in. But I really learned how to communicate better, how to really relax in the understand operation tempo and manage that. And then I will just qualify midway through. I was given a transportation platoon that had 58 trucks and trailers, hundreds of thousand kilometers a year. I had 24 Americans, 13 New Zealanders, and I had how many Uruguayans? I can't remember. I had 36 Americans, 24 Uruguayans, and 13 New Zealanders. And that group, those soldiers were absolutely 88 mics, all day infantry guys, but 88 mics, little troublesome outside of when they're not driving, but ask them to do thousands of miles on the roads in the harshest conditions you can imagine. Actually getting hijacked. This was crazy. Nobody would really talk about this, but the Egyptian soldiers that were put out on the roads were like the most unkept, ill-equipped, no water, no food. And they would literally, even though we knew they didn't have ammo, we were required to stop at their checkpoints. And they would make these makeshift checkpoints in the desert and make these checkpoints in the desert. Our guys have to stop and they'd hijack them for water and snacks and stuff because they're so miserable. But our guys would do amazing. Also this season, and Egypt would teach me really the value of service. I'd experienced loss, when I was in the 10th Mountain, we had a guy killed in Panama. When we went to Panama, a tree branch broke off and killed the individual. I saw some people injured, they did the wrong thing. And on a, what do you call it? Trench. They were doing trench clearing and got shot, got injured. But I was also as a quartermaster, guys, most people don't know, we get assigned as a mortuary affairs officer. And so I was assigned as a mortuary affairs officer, and we had a soldier killed in a traffic accident. And so I had to, with my commander, Captain Newell, prepare the remains and then be the guy that transported the remains to Landstuhl and then gets assigned as the action officer and travel all the way back to the United States and turn over the remains to the family, and present the flag, be that guy. Actually relieved from duty the casualty assistance officer because of how poorly he was doing caring for the family. But, understanding that real sacrifice for service the whole way through, and understanding, wow, okay, this is more than what because, in peacetime we train, right? We have tragedy, we have injuries. I've seen buddies injured and, like I said, people shot and, yeah, but the reality of it and the sacrifice that we really do, because it's the roads, it's training that often is the most casualty creator for our military because we do things so well. and safety is paramount. And that also helped me as a future leader, not compromise on safety. BII, if people don't know what BII is, it's that little stuff, safety equipment. It's the stuff that's in the car, that makes sure that you have a wrench, you have a jack, you have bottles. I've been on the roads all over Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Jordan, having water in your car, safety equipment, that's life saving, having a cell phone, those types of things. Those apply to life here with us around, and they apply overseas, whether in peacetime and in combat. And so, learning that, um, was critical. Uh, yeah, and so having all that favor and that success when I came back to Fort Bragg after Egypt, um, 12 months in Egypt, um, I was kind of a duck out of water because to branch, there's not many prior service, you know, trained and equipped guys like I was, and so I was assigned to Special Operations Support Command. Um, Back then, we had instead of the 528 Sustainment Brigade, there was only a single 528 Special Operations Support Battalion that augmented the Special Forces Group and the Tier 1 assets, JSOC and SFOD, CAG, here on Fort Bragg. And so I got assigned out there, and then you'll know this. I don't know if you ever had the opportunity. For years, you get to go to Jump Master School, you get to go to Air Assault School, but the big thing is Pathfinder School, right? You're like, I want to. And so I never went to. Absolute worst thing that I ever was at was math. Just I got an F in college in math. When I moved schools after my mom remarried, my math skills were so poor. I was a junior and I was put in the freshman math. You know what I mean? And so I was like, hey, Sharon Cole, you want to go Pathfinder School? I'm like, because I knew probably I would not do well because of the math, the formulas, right? And sure enough, every platoon leader and platoon sergeant assigned to the 528 had to be Pathfinder qualified. So, the concept of green platoon assessment selection, that was part of your assessment selection, is that you, because we did what were called over the horizon logistics. So whether it was a SF unit doing, reconnaissance, or, any other element, whatever they were doing, we would, a terrain 4,000 meters or a terrain feature away we would set up, receive the supplies, and then send them out, set up the cache, and they would come back and get them. And that's the way it worked. And so we were responsible for setting up our own LZs, DZs, PZs, calling in all of that, independent. We had no JTAX or anything. We had to set it all up. And again, and I didn't say this for air assault school or screw school, sequence was everything, right? What do we learn as jump masters? What do we teach as jump master instructors? Is sequence, sequence, sequence. In army learning, everything is sequence. If you can memorize the sequence, right, you'll be able to accomplish the task. And make your acronym or whatever the sequence is. And so, and what happened the year I got to go to Pathfinder School? They allowed calculators. Yep. And so, yes. And so that's again, I don't mean to be braggadocious. What I'm trying to communicate here is that when you commit yourself unto the Lord, when you make your priority Him, He says He promises to meet the desires of our heart. Right? We're to let our requests be known. And that was one of my getting to be special operations was one of the desires of my heart. But I said, no, Father, what I'm going to do is I'm going to honor you. And first and foremost, I'm going to give my family. I'm going to focus on my family. Yeah, I have to do the hard deployments or those types of things, but I want I my wife, my relationship with my wife, my children, um, the relationships I have, I'm going to commit those first to you. And so, and in that there were opportunities, divine opportunities. I mean, you know, I'll tell you another one here in just a few moments. And so, going to and there's another redeeming story in this I just want to communicate. So I get the opportunity to go to Pathfinder school. I'm at Benning, and we're like day 2 in the course. And I look across, and there's this guy, an NCO, a sergeant, high speed sergeant, ranger, jump master, and EIB, and he's looking at me and like, you know, and I'm like, what did I do? Did I, pee in this guy's Wheaties? Did I bump into him and not say I'm sorry or whatever? And so I just walk over and I'm like, hey, how are you? I'm Lieutenant Cole. And he didn't shake my hand. And he's like, and he's just arms crossed, and he's got some other NCOs around him. He's like, used to be Sergeant Cole, didn't you? And I went, oh. I was like, yes, I was. He's like, you used to smoke me. He said, you used to smoke the out of me whenever you saw me in the in the in the CP area. And so back then, I don't know if you remember, like the way the World War II barracks were set up, like one company headquarters was on this side and the other company headquarters was on the other side. And so Delta Company 505, first to the 505th, was on the back side of our building. 1505, HHC 1505 headquarters was on this side, right? And so the Chow Hall, Gala's not there, but the road the Chow Hall was on, because remember back then, every battalion had its own Chow Hall, right? The Chow Hall, it was easier, less resistance to come running from the Chow Hall and go through our CP area out those double doors to their CP area for formation, right? Their rocks were on the backside, and it was easier. Instead, I have to run all the way around the end of the building to get, and so and I would see him, or I guess, and I would be like, "Who are you? Stop right there! What are you doing?" And front lean rest position, roll, cockroach, flutter kicks, do all that stuff, right? And and so he's like, look at me, and he's like, "Yeah, you treated me, blah blah blah," and I was like, I just had to humble myself and say, "Hey, I can't even remember the guy's name, but Sergeant Tent Peg, I just want to say, please forgive me. I'm not that man anymore, and that was wrong. If anything, I should have, opened the door for you and said, get to formation, instead of stop you, harass you, and it was, did he forgive me? No, you know, but it was an opportunity for me to go, hey, you know what? Please forgive me, because I'm not that man now. I'm not, no, I shouldn't have done that. Can you be hard and disciplined and terse without being profane, without being, attacking the character of the individual? Can you make correction? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Um, as a captain, did I, you know, make people do push-ups? Yeah. Did I make lieutenant? Yeah. Did I get down with my whole company, my platoons? Yeah, absolutely. Right. I wasn't the guy. I truly am saying this. I wasn't never the guy that would stand under the rain, under the canopy while the company was out in the rain. Right. I always tried to, because of my enlisted background, I always tried to be um, the muddy boots leader. Right. Okay, wherever we go, whatever we do, I'm going to be the first one. Not a prideful thing. It's just, okay. Um, I'm going to try to be the guy leading out front, so that nobody can say, well, you don't know what has happened to me. that experience. It's like, no, no, no. Yeah, I can relate. And so here's how we can deal with it in a healthy way and a non-positive way. And I don't just say that flippantly. It was a life choice, and it was a transition that I truly for I would have to say for almost 20 plus years of my career, I tried to do that. Right. Um, One thing I also want to say is that my leader, my senior leader, he's a mentor of mine, Major General John Wharton. Um, he uh, he retired being over all of the labs of the Army, all the testing and evaluation labs. I'm still in contact with him weekly. Um, uh, when it comes to, there's a difference between being saved and working out your salvation. Does it make sense? And so occasionally I would have a problem with my language, right? And one day we were doing something and I cussed, and he looked at me and he's like, "Hey, Kelly, come here, Ranger," because he was Ranger qualified too. He was prior service. And he's like, "Hey, are you lazy?" And I was like, kind of taken back. I'm like, "Lazy?" He's like, "Yeah, would you say you're undisciplined?" I'm like, "No, sir, not at all." He's like, "Do you know it only takes a millisecond to think of another word?" I'm like, he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "So he's like, what I was taught by my dad was that profanity is one of the highest forms of laziness." And I understand there might be a time of there needs to be terse, attention. But I was like, wow, I was like, lazy, you know? And he's like, and what happened was over that year, General Wharton would be like, "Kelly, you're being lazy right now," you know? And it was just a mentorship thing. And and over the years he would be like, "Hey, what's your," because he was the one that really taught the 3 to 5 plan, right? Because he's like, "Okay, where do you see yourself?" And made us write it out in a PowerPoint, right? That this was a countable document. That anytime you counsel with me, you will have your updated 3 to 5 year plan on where you see yourself spiritually, emotionally, um, educationally, and financially. Right? The given thing of accomplishing all your qualified jobs and all that stuff, that's on there. But he's like, where do you see yourself? Because often what happened was, and this happened to me, I don't know if it happened to you, Will, but after my first enlistment, right, I was no better off educationally, really. I was no better off financially. I was better spiritually. Emotionally, I was growing. But um, so what did I have to do? I had to reenlist, right? I didn't really have a plan. And so he set us down and he's like, okay. And oh, by the way, he was like a certified financial planner. You know, you know, he had owned multiple properties, in Washington, D.C. And so, you know, um, he made us professionally read, which I really had never done before, like not only on strategy and leadership. I mean, we understood what, FM 100-1 said, and all the, we knew how to do our op orders and all that stuff and training and all that stuff, but really understanding what is the strategy, right? The exposure to what's happening at the strategic operational, why are we on the peninsula of the MFO, right? Why are we here? How does that influence? Who's our partners in the region? Things that you're like, what? As an infantryman, we never, not until the global war on terror, I would say, but before that, we would never. Oh, our enemy was Russian, right? Cold War stuff. Um, never talking about narco-terrorism or any of that stuff. And so, what was going on in the regions of the South. And so, but yeah, that was an amazing time. And then coming back to Fort Bragg, being assigned to the Special Operations Support Command, it just again opened opened a world of opportunity. And then, of course, um, 2002 happened, and so within about 6 months, I was in Afghanistan. with 3rd Special Forces Group, and I was the Deputy J9 there. And we were actually in Afghanistan before there was ever, it was Bagram Air Base. It was Bagram, but there was no Disney Drive. Private Disney hadn't died yet. You could, you'd walk to the makeshift shower, and you could trip on a bone. You know what I mean? Because most people don't know that 4,000 people were beheaded by the Taliban for supporting Russian forces there at Bagram before. We were clearing minefields out, right? And when we got there, force provider hadn't come yet. It came while we were there, but it hadn't came. We actually had moved down from Kyrgyzstan down into Afghanistan at the time, and supported them. And then what I didn't tell you was I had the opportunity. I want to tell this story because this is, again, I believe this all goes back to the Psalms 37 thing. I don't know if you remember this, but one of my students was a guy who's now retired. He's an advisor to the civilian advisor to the Secretary of the Army, retired Major General Yves Fontaine. I don't know if you remember that name at all. So General Fontaine was a battalion commander in Fort Stewart, lieutenant colonel, and he was airborne qualified, but he was the first non-jump master 05 to come to Bragg to take command in the sustainment brigade.
Okay.
And so he came down. General Steele was our general division commander at the time. And so, and I don't know if you ever remember, General Steele came down there and he poked his finger into General Fontaine's chest and said, "Hey, Fontaine, if you don't pass jump master school, you're not taking command." I don't know if you remember that. He came down. General Steele came down to the jump master school, and so he was in my stick, and so ultimately he passed. He got a jump master. He was a day 2 failure, but got a jump master special, right? But he passed. A competent jump master. So I say that so I come back to Fort Bragg. I'm assigned, and so every time that we see each other on our dans, it was always, "Hey, jump master." I'm like, "Hey, sir." "Hey, jump master." Like that relationship on our dans. And so here it is. He went to jump master school in 1995. Here it is, 1999. Okay. I'm back at Bragg, and I'm assigned to the Special Operations Support Command, and they're having a tactical dining in, right? So we go out to St. Mary Glees, we jump, all this stuff, and we're at pre-jump, and no, we're done. We're done jumping, and we're about to do this in the field dining in type thing, right? Everybody's still in BDUs, camoed up, and all this stuff, and it had rained, and I see across the way, and I see now Colonel Fontaine, right? Not Lieutenant Colonel. And so I go over to him, and he sees me. He's like, "Hey, sir." He's like, and punches me in. He's Belgian, right? He's Belgian. And so he's like, punches me in the chest, and he's like, what the you doing out here? Jump master. And he looks at me, he's like, "Oh no, what the blah, 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 happened to," cursing. He's like, "What the happened to you?" I was like, "Oh, sir, I went to OCS and got commissioned." He's like, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Sir, I'm in the SOSCOM." He's like, "The SOSCOM?" I was like, "Yeah, what are you doing?" And he punches him in the chest, almost knocks me down. He's like, I'm your effing commander." I'm like, and I get it, I'm like, "Sure." He's like, "Who's your boss?" And I was like, Captain Walls, and he's like, and he yells out, and he's like, "Mac." And so Colonel McMillan comes over, my battalion commander, and now my company commander, like, telling the story of how I was his jump master instructor stick leader when when I was an E5 and he was a lieutenant, new lieutenant colonel in the 82nd. And he's like, "Where are you sitting?" And all this stuff. And, I'm a lieutenant, I'm a first lieutenant, and I'm like, and all the majors, and because back then, company commanders outside of HHC, all the commanders are majors, and uh, and everybody's like, looking like, why is the boss talking to this guy? And then Colonel Mack is like, Colonel Mack goes, comes up to me, and he's like, hey, you need to stay away. He's like, you need to stay away from the colonel. He's like, because if he gets you, he's going to steal you and take you up to brigade, up to the regiment, and the brigade. And I'm like, yes, sir. And so, long story short, 9 months later, I get selected as a first lieutenant as the HHC SOSCOM company commander.
Oh, imagine that. Heck yeah, Jump
Yeah,
Master. I
yeah,
love
yeah. And Colonel Mack was a little upset because he was like, I want you to, I want you to become an XO of one of the companies. But yeah, as a first lieutenant, I got selected as that was my first company command. I don't know if I told you, but I ended up having 4 commands, 4 company commands. And part of that whole story of stewardship is that I loved leading soldiers, right? I love training. Because again, a lot of soldiers don't understand this training strategy, right? So, like, who is the company commander's primary training audience, right? It's the squad leaders, right? It- because they execute, they're the one, they're the trainers, right? And I don't think that, I really never understood that as an enlisted guy. I never really understood um, why we were doing what we were doing, because it was always this hurry up and wait, behind the scenes, and so much wasted time that we were done. And the Army was so very, very good at taking our time away, right? And I was like, wow. And I realized very soon, and it was different in the special ops realm, right? Because when we were done, we were done. Kind of the big boy rules were in effect, that when we were done with training, we were trained to standard, everything was good to go. You go home, because at the moment's notice, we could go away. And that was part of the being in the platoon, part of the SOSCOM was we did modular logistics before modular logistics were a thing. We had modularized teams of what we needed to go and do. And then we'd come home when we were done. Whether that was 40, 60 days, 30 days, we were done, we'd come home and then refit and then be ready to go again. And so being able to command, um, as a lieutenant, and then had the opportunity after Afghanistan. And the way my career worked out, and I don't know about you, was I would be in an operational unit and then I'd train. Um, and so I would basically, I was like in SOSCOM, and then I was part of, I went to Afghanistan, then I came back, and then I went to the schoolhouse. So I was part of 4th Battalion, the MOS Battalion for Special Forces Training. I was a headquarters support company commander for 4th Battalion. And so that I was not only the headquarters company commander, but I was also the S4. I was also the med service officer, supplying all of that for the MOS Battalion um, of First Special Warfare Group's 4th Battalion. Before I went there, I wanted to show you even General Fontaine, when he was in 06, he had me conduct and be the OIC for 2 jump master courses. Right, so we ran the SOSCOM ran 2 jump master courses for all of the SOSCOM and any special forces soldiers. Right, and then I was an OIC also for in civil affairs when we did a jump master course, and that never left. It was pretty cool being able to um, switch them around. Wearing master parachuter's wings with a first lieutenant bar, being the OIC for Jumpmaster courses. Yeah.
I got to interrupt right now. Okay, if
Yeah.
you're a fake jump master, you got trained by Lieutenant Cole over here with some crazy jump master course, and you need
Oh,
legal
call Penny.
representation, call Penny. Okay,
Okay.
call Penny Cox. Okay, and if you got legal help with anything, call, call Penny
That's
Cox.
funny.
I'm having such a blast hanging out with you. You realize that we have just really, you have just blown some stories. I really enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
really
No.
have.
We still have some time, right?
Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I know my wife says that um I have the gift of gab. She can call me, but anything but late for dinner, right? But it's fun talking about these stories because I get to kind of flow the enlisted side with the officer side because it never left. The foundation of again, our motto in OCS was standard. There's no compromise, right? And being a jump master, being a jump master instructor, um, and literally you have the life of people's in their hands, right? And being meticulous in being able to understand your equipment, um, understand the pros and cons of the utilization of it, all of that, right? You know, we have, I get quickened at the heart of trying to use, you know, hit a screwdriver with a hammer, right? you know, no, I need to go get a chisel. You know what I mean? Because that's the right tool. That's the way, because we've seen it in our career, people not do the right thing, right? People don't do the right thing in life. It's all about choices, conscious or subconscious choices, that we make that will influence people, right? Whether we, again, I'm not beating anybody up. Text and drive or whatever it may be, speed, whatever it can be, right? It can affect people. And so, but that thread of General Fontaine now uh, being at the SOSCOM, right? And then what happened was when I got done with being the commander within 4th Battalion SWIC. Well, I'll tell a funny story there. So I'm walking down the hallway of Bank Hall, and the second we come out of a briefing, and it's kind of a weird situation, right? And so uh, I'm walking in the 2nd Battalion, the Special Schools Battalion, um, the Special Skills Battalion commander is walking there, and um, I'm trying to think, Sean Mulholland. He's later a 1-star, not the 3-star. But he stops me in the hallway, and he's like, and I'm like, sir, he's like, hey, Captain Cole, I want to talk to you. I was like, sir. He's like, you think you're pretty high speed? And I'm like, like taken aback. I'm like, no, sir. He's like, no, sir. I was like, no, sir. He's like, no, I think you're pretty high speed. I'm like, he's like, you know why I'm going to send you to Halo School? You want to go to Halo School? And I'm like, I had been, jump master, I'd been to air school, all those opportunities. And I didn't tell you that, you know, I even went to rigger school, right? And so one of the jobs of a quartermaster officer is to be the air delivery maintenance officer. Every rigger company has a company commander, right? And I was like, sure, sir. I bet. I was like, sure, sir. Why? He's like, and he put his finger in my chest, and he's like, because one day I'm going to need something, and you're going to give it to me. And I was like, sir. He's like, okay. He's like, I'm going to talk to the G3. He's like, I'm going to talk to your boss, set you up, because he's like, you're doing a great job here, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to, I'm going to square you away. And so, and people don't be mad. If you did not know, there's what's called the military free fall um, accelerated free fall course, the military free fall accelerated course. And so he's like, what we're going to do is we're going to get you your B class license. You're going to wait, stand by. I did my medical, I did my HAP training, all that stuff. And so he's like, you're going to stand by, but if you don't get into an actual course, then 90 days later, we'll send you the free fall course. So they gave me the credits to go out to, I couldn't take any duty day, but they gave me the credits to go out to Rayford Drop Zone and get my Class B free fall license, right? And then, um, and then ultimately, I went to Yuma with the accelerated free fall course. And the uniqueness of that was what was so cool was that sequence, right? Sequence again, because knowing how to pack your parachute, knowing everything about the parachute, how to do your own inspection, how to rig things, how to stop and mentally go, okay, I need to put this in a process because at the accelerated freefall course, most people would not know that if you if you pack your parachute wrong, right? So JMPI, you get inspected, there's a problem, you're out of the course. Safety violation, you're gone. Not turning on your Cypress or whatever, the sequence, right? You have to pack it in time. You can't just take your time and pack it. You have to pack it within time and then get it inspected. And if there's any problems, you're a safety violation, you're gone. There's no like, oh, go repack it, try again. You're gone. If you jump out of the airplane, out of the aircraft, and you have 1,000 feet of instability, you're out. If you have more than 500 feet high or low pull, you're out of the course, right? And so, and you make, our course, we made 16 jumps, right? We started with 18 people and we graduated with 10. You know what I mean? That's how and I mean, it was literally that quick. But being prior, Ranger, jump master instructor, Ranger instructor, I taught while I was an instructor, the HHC commander as a logistics officer, I taught a logistics class to 18 Charlies, right, at the schoolhouse. Again, being up on the platform, having that comfortability, knowing how to take questions, knowing your material that you're teaching, having command of the knowledge. And what I had learned from Dan Bennett, was, what, when you give an answer, stand behind your answer, right? Don't let them question your authority, right? Because you're the instructor, and never let them see them sweat, right? Defer and deflect. Jump master, I do not know that question, but immediately upon the break, I will get the answer for you and do it. Follow up, right? Because then they'll be like, wow, I didn't expect the guy to actually take the time to find the answer and give it to me. But yeah, and so I left. So at this time, Colonel Fontaine had great success within USASOC. Believe it or not, because of the global war on terror, he was the first non-SF officer to be the chief of staff of USASOC. And he brought a lot of systems and processes back to the USASOC headquarters. And so, long story short, he got promoted to 1-star. Colonel Mack got promoted to 06. Captain Wells got promoted to major. And at the time, I was a logistics officer, so I needed a job. And I was supposed to go to Korea. Amazing testimony. Plane ticket in hand, whole baggage shipped to Korea. And I was supposed to go to Korea. And then I had called Colonel Mack and General Fontaine and said, hey, is there a job anywhere? And they were working now in the COSCOM. I could tell you, I was I was at Lowe's. They said no. We said, Father, we thank you for your perfect will. We went to Chick-fil-A there right on Skybo Road and getting a sweet tea. And they called us and said, hey, there's an assignment that we've never seen before. Oh, do you want it? And yeah, and so we got a job, and so I ended up going across the street to COSCOM, and they basically said, "Hey," because I'd had two commands at this time. They're like, "Hey, I'm not giving you a command. You have to serve on staff for a year." But here's a unique story. You'll like this. Um, Part of my job when I was at SWIC was I oversaw all of the Army's, well, correction, all of the Special Forces qualification course. I was the um, contract representative. I was the COR for the contract for all of the combatives training for SWIC. And so, as the COR, to know that, to be able to quality assure the training, I went through the training, did all the combatives training that the special forces students were getting, and became an instructor at their, part-time instructor would go down and instruct that. And so the boss knew that, and we were the war, here we are 2002, 2003, we've entered in Iraq, and I go over to COSCOM, and the boss says, "Hey, I want you to build me a combatives program." So lo and behold, part of my job, I worked in the CSG. I was assigned to Colonel Matt, the 46 CSG, but part of my job was building a combatives program for all of the COSCOM in preparation deployment to Iraq. And so at the culmination, the height of the program, I had 250 instructors training over 6,000 soldiers twice a week in combatives. And that foundation all started at the Jumpmaster School there way back then. And it was amazing. And I believe what it did was it drew, there were pros and cons to the program. It was generic, but the bottom line is, if you did the program, it taught you how to kill somebody in 36 ways in about, you know, it, you know, in a very quick time frame. You had 36, to defend yourself, to be able to be confident that you didn't have to use a weapon, you didn't have to use, those were in attachments and enhancements to the weapon system, which is yourself. And you didn't have to really, it was memorization. And so you didn't have to have, you could do the training anywhere. And it was a great program. And then the commander that came, the commanding general that came in afterwards was like, "Hey, Kelly, I want to do a different type of combatives. Can we do this?" And it was a screama with sticks. And so we ordered like 800 pairs of, well, if you didn't know, mosquito nets have two sets of poles in them. And so those poles could be used as a screama poles. But anyway, and so here I am, a quartermaster guy in the COSCOM, and one of my primary jobs outside of my normal accountability job was to teach combatives. And so then, I'll pick up the pace here. But I moved. So the night before, so General Fontaine, I was selected for command again to command a rigger company, the amazing 623rd Repair Devils. They're in the COSCOM. They were aerial delivery repairing personal parachutes, and I don't think we did any heavy repair. I think that was 600. But the night, there was a great guy, Abel. I can't remember Abel's last name, but amazing commander before them, prepping them. I did my change command inventory with them, and the night prior to taking command, we knew this was coming, called me up to the COSCOM headquarters with Colonel Mack and the team, and he's like, "Hey, Kelly, I want you to get together 90 riggers, and I want you to be my force protection company for Iraq." And so I had 5 weeks to prepare and train 90 riggers. It ended up being 80 to prepare to go to war and be a combat element. And And so it was a tough challenge, accepted, took command, and began that process. The battalion commander, you may have heard of him, Colonel Gordon Roberts. He was a only active duty living Medal of Honor recipient. So we got assigned to the HHB of the COSCOM. He was the commander of that. And so he helped facilitated. And so we took 5 weeks of really learning how to shoot, move, communicate, some medicate, and survive on the battlefield. And so we started, and we deployed to Iraq in November of 2004 as Task Force Warrior, and and we to known existence there had been rigger units in combat, like in Vietnam, and airdrop unit, but never. Our primary mission was not to do. It was to be combat support. It was to actually our first unit, our first job that we did there in Iraq when we arrived was we replaced a company of the 81st, a unit out of Hawaii, as the LSA Anaconda QRF. We replaced an infantry unit, and we were responsible for all the security, 5 guard posts, and then all the security out to 198 combat mounted and dismounted logistics patrols. We did. We had a couple of ticks that we got into. We got a lot of bad guys. The team performed. The company performed amazing. And then we got put on the road. We did some convoy logistics patrols in the beginning with some what we called Haji armored vehicles, with sandbags and Kevlar blankets, and but then we got 26 11 14 vehicles, the first generation of armored, well armored vehicles. Stories, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, we procured, had to procure radio mounts and procure radios. I had like 20 hand receipts across Anaconda to get enough radios. So they issued us vehicles, right? But no commo, right? Part of the time that we were, I'll tell you this funny story. I'm retired 8 years, and I did nothing illegal. But because I was in special operations, I knew how to use fund codes, right, to order stuff. Because I was an S4 and didn't have a brigade for, I could directly order for vendors, right? So if they knew our code, and if I knew my own code and knew my budget, I could order directly from the vendor, and they would bill to my account, right? And so that 5 weeks preparation, I ordered over 70,000. My budget for the year was like 120,000. I ordered over $70,000 in equipment for the unit, right? Compasses, slings for weapons, cleaning kits, survival kits, first aid kits, radios. Like we got some radios that we could have headsets, that because we were driving vehicles and we had because we were we were an MTO unit, but I had six Humvees and like 2 radios, um, and so they were just like, hey, we'll pick up the equipment, we'll get it, over there. And we literally drove from Kuwait, Camp Arifjan, all the way to Ellis Anaconda, across the berm, everything, with like 4 radios, with 15 vehicles, and with a convoy of 100 some odd vehicles. We had 3 serials. It was crazy. And so we had radios, heads, earplugs, and to talk to each other just in our sticks. right? It was bizarre that we drove literally from all the way up Route Tampa, Cloverleaf to north, through bypass Iraq, Fallujah, and go north um, in Haji armored vehicles. It was crazy. And yeah, and so I actually ordered 70. The S4 called down. It was like the group group DCO wants to talk to you. Right? And so I go up there and I'm like, and then when I'm talking to him, Colonel Mack is like, Kelly, is that you? Get your blinky blink in here. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, sir, we have no equipment. Blah, blah, blah. He's like, how did you do this? I'm like, well, sir, blah, blah, blah. He's like, don't order, he's like, do you have what you, he's like, do you have what you need? Right. Because we were getting issued 9 mil pistols, right? We didn't have any holsters. The commander and first sergeant had holsters, but every squad leader, every platoon, my, this is amazing. And this is why I love the Army, is 2 of my platoon leaders were CW2 um, warrant officers, CW1 warrant officers, and then and then my XO was a second lieutenant, right? But I had rigor sergeants rising up, understanding what we needed to do, following, really creating our SOPs. You know, I could take a lot of the infantry stuff, squad tactics and stuff like that, but them building our own SOPs on how we're going to react to contact, because we weren't 11 11 deltas, right? And I think that's the MOS. We weren't Cav Scouts, we weren't any of those guys, but we are now. We're running, we're doing mounted and dismounted patrolling around this large base, and then now we're out on the road. And to their credit, these guys did over 410 combat logistics patrols, over 200,000 miles on the roads of Iraq in the 11 months we were there. Out of the guys, we had 68 cabs. Um, you know, you would understand at that time the bureaucracy of Valor. Couldn't get the guys Valor devices for actions that they did. I did end up having 5 wounded and 1 KIA. That was one of the hardest things I endured as a commander. But yeah, I had a great, first sergeant was great, amazing guy. Really helped balance the pressure that we were put under by the battalion commander and the sergeant major to perform. But yeah, that was a life changing year. The gray hair, I really believe, it came a lot from that first initial. Afghanistan. What was crazy about Afghanistan is we had defeated the Northern Alliance had defeated the Taliban, and we could really really drive around Afghanistan in soft skin in the beginning and not really worry about anything, right? Um, you had a question about, like, the first time I ever fired a weapon in combat was in Afghanistan, right? We were getting contact from the right, and we shot at him. It was like, whoa, okay, this is real. Can we shoot? It's like, yeah, shoot the guy. Shoot the team, and we shot at him, but it really was the 50 cal and the Mark 19 that did the work. You know what I mean? And same thing in Iraq, or it was the guys that with the heavy weapons that did all of the work. But yeah, that was one of the toughest years in my life. And then you go back to Afghanistan for a short tour in 2006, and sure enough, you got to be buttoned up. I had a different job for the little while I was there, and so flying out, you were sure enough to get shot at. You were sure, it was like, oh, okay, this is different. But yeah, like going to Afghanistan the first time, you were still wearing your LCE. I had the same LCE that I had as a Ranger instructor, that I was in SOSCOM with. Um, just got point blank body armor. They bought some body armor that a SWAT team would use or whatever, and you just wore the body armor and put your LCE over, and um, you know, that's the way you rolled in Afghanistan the first time, right? You didn't have any armor on your vehicles, none of that. You just had a tour, But anyway, I mean, yeah, and we just saw the progression of violence. Both got out of Iraq, and then said went back to Afghanistan. And what happened was why. So make another transition is in 2006. Back at the time was coming up at the COSCOM, right? And I was wanting to get a S3 job. That was kind of the next progression, right? I was a senior captain. I'm in my third command, getting ready to come out of command, and everyone's like, "Hey, Kelly, you need to leave Fort Bragg. You need to leave Fort Bragg. Go out and do Army logistics. You need to go to Fort Hood, multifunctional logistics, right? You need to go, in use of sockets, duct tape, quote hangers, but go be a big multifunctional logistician in Hood or Stewart, Riley, somewhere like that." And I was like, no, you know what? I don't want to leave USASOC. I don't want to leave Fort Bragg. I don't want to leave the airborne community. And they're like, it's bad for you. It's going to be bad for you because they're, I was like, yeah. And so I was like, hey, I want to go, I want to go civil affairs. And then they're like, hey, there's this MIT mission. Instead of going civil affairs, there's this MIT mission. You're not on the list, but just understand you could. And I'm like, oh, okay, but I'm like 150 on the list for captains, right? And the criteria is, senior captain, um, not in command. I thought it was going to be an aide to future General Dunwitty. I thought it was going to go be her aide, potentially, stuff like that. And so next thing you know, Colonel Mack's like, hey, Kelly, you're like number 68 on the list. And I'm like, what? I'm in command. I'm a senior, well, I'm letting you know you're on the list. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I get notified again by the leadership, hey, Kelly, you're number 25. And it just keeps going down. And I'm like, I don't. And then next thing you know, like, hey, Kelly, you're number 5 on the list. You're selected to go to Iraq for 14 months to be a trainer to the Iraqi forces. And I'm like, I have put in my packet to go. I'm like, I've already put my packet in to go civil affairs, go back to USASOC, go to assessment selection, become a civil affairs officer. And they're like, well, it looks like you're the senior guy on the team. So we're going to pull you out of command. And I was like, oh, okay. And so begin to prepare your command inventory and get out of command. And I was like, oh, wow. And so come out of command. Bottom line is kiss mom and everybody. So we have to go to Fort Hood. And I'm the OIC of this 5 officers, 5 senior NCOs. We get on the plane. We get to Texas, and they go, we get to the airport, and there's no one there to pick us up. There's a reception van there picking up a couple privates, and we're like, hey, we're blah, blah, blah. And they're like, hey, we can take you out to North Fort Hood and take us out there. And they'd already been there 35 days. And we're like, whoa. And they're like, hey, Kelly, you need to call Colonel Mack. I call Colonel Mack, and I'm like, hey, we're not supposed to be here. And they're like, hey, whatever you do, don't go anywhere. If they say, hey, we're going out to training, you just stay where you're at. And lo and behold, the G3 of the COSCOM had missed a frago somehow. And it was basically mob them, train them, but don't deploy. And Will, we're talking guys literally had given up like JCS, right? Joint Staff Opportunity, NCOs like, First Sergeants Academy, all that stuff, right? People had moved their families, moved their stuff in storage, and I had literally I had literally, kissed everybody goodbye, crying at the airport, and we took off from Fayetteville Airport. And so he finds that out, and he's like, "Hey, don't tell anybody, but when you get plane tickets in hand, um, you can let your family know." And yeah, so 14 months turned into 30 hours. And so we sat around the new COSCOM commander. The COSCOM had now become the first TSC, right? And after General Fontaine had given out, taken left, and so he went around the table basically and said, "Hey, whatever you want within my power, you get." There were a couple of captains said we want to resign our commission. There were a couple of people that NCOs are like, "Hey, we're retiring. This is absurd. This happened." And I was like, "I want to go civil affairs." And like, this guy was General Leonard. I knew him because he was the SOSCOM commander after. So he's like, "Okay, okay, Kelly, you got it." And so that's how I went civil affairs. And went across the way, went to the schoolhouse, and pinned on major while in the schoolhouse. I wanted Arabic, but I wasn't talented enough to. I didn't do well on the D lab, so they put me in Spanish. But what's funny is, as soon as I graduated the Q course, the Civil Affairs Qualification course, and that's a big note for everyone on here. I just want to qualify this, right? Let's get this out in the air. There is special forces, but there are Green Berets, are special forces. But there are other special operation forces that have assessment selection and a qualification course. So, and there's green platoons that assess different special operation forces. And so went through assessment selection, went through qualification course, went through language school. Instead of a Green Beret and a knife, we got a master's degree, and the equivalent of a master's degree in international relations with a focus on our area of specialty. Mine was Latin America with a focus on Honduras, but believe it or not, I had a vision when I was leaving Kuwait from Iraq that I would be back there, and sure enough, graduated the course. Our first, I got put in the original build company of the 97th Charlie Company, and that was built by a company of teams of guys that had just come back from Colombia. And so and then we got sent, and we were the original build company of the 98 Civil Affairs, and we our mission was to go to Iraq, to Basra, and counter influence Iranian influence in southern Iraq. But this goes back to never sacrificing family on the altar of our own success. So about 5-10 weeks prior to deployment, my father was in a near fatal accident and ejected from the vehicle. And so ultimately what happened was he lived, even though he coded 3 times. And so what happened was he got put in the neural step down, and they're basically like he met his $1 million cap, and they're like, "Hey, he's got to go home." And at the time, we've been caring since 2004, caring for both our in-laws, and my mother-in-law is disabled. And so now my wife we have 3 children at the time, and one is little, and she's like, "I got a toddler, I've got a 8-year-old, I think 8, but I've got young children, I've got a disabled mother, and now they want to send my father home, and I've got to cath him and clean his bedpan and all this stuff, and I can't do it. I've been with you, deployed for 4 months in 96, gone in 99, gone in 2002, gone in 04. That doesn't include pre-mission training, that all that stuff, right? And then all that time in the division. And so I'm like, I went to the command and I said, "Hey, here's the situation." and they were kind enough to take me off of um, because I'm a major now. They took me off of pulled me out of my team, Cat 835, and let me care for my parents, care for my uh, help. And what was funny, this is the Army again in its uniqueness. They pull me off my team, give it to another team leader, right? And then they say, oh, because you're not deploying, we now want to send you for 10 months to Fort Leavenworth to CGSC. And I'm like, put me back on the team and I'll go down range for 9 months. That would be better than sending me to, I'd make extra pay, I'd be with my team that I've been with for a long time. No, we need to send you to CGSC. And the saving grace was I had favor and got selected for a new program. It was called a Spiral 3 of a hybrid CGSC for special operations soldiers. So instead of taking them out of the force so long, you had an online portion and then a residence. And it cuts your time down. But basically, CGSC was 5 months instead of 10 months. And so that was really a blessing because I was ahead of my peers. Because I had CGSC now when other peers were waiting for CGSC. And so then my last command, I commanded in the civil affairs. I commanded in the 91st Civil Affairs. Actually, that was an amazing time because this unit had never existed before. It had heritage back to the first civil affairs company or something back in Vietnam or Korean War. But so I was actually what was called the 91st SUC, the 91st stand-up cell. And we literally created the flash. We created the motto. It was just two of us, a lieutenant colonel and a major. I was, creating this entity. Literally, we had 6 people, and we got assigned 100. We got all of our MTO vehicles, radios, and weapons, with like 8 people in the entire battalion. We weren't even. We were not even officially. We were in carrier status, so we were. To get the motto, I worked with the Duke and the Chapel Hill religious divisions and U.S. Army Heldry to get most people don't know that the max you can have in any one motto is 26 letters and spaces. And so we created the motto, we created the flash, we would literally take students that were on blackbirds or bluebirds waiting to go into the course to come down and help us do our Monday morning motor stables, count equipment, because we just didn't have enough people in our own battalion to count the equipment that we were now in possession of. I did a $2.6 million renovation of 8 World War II barracks down by Pike Field to move our battalion into. Took weeks to get the asbestos out of the barracks. Everything it takes to procure a class 5 arms room, mobile arms room, to be able to store your nods and equipment in. And all that was part of the process of the civil affairs, working with those amazing folks over there. But there was a price to pay. You've heard the terms, and I don't mean this, I'm not attacking anybody at all, but you're broken goods, so you're kind of, because I didn't go on that deployment, I was kind of set up on this trajectory of when I was eligible for a 3 job, the critical civil affairs 3 job, they moved somebody else. Actually, a funny story. My roommate in 10th Mountain was specialist. You know how you shared bathrooms in those co-ed barracks, and our roommate when I was a private there was a guy named Specialist Les Moten, and there was a big sign on his door, and said he was gone. His room was locked up because he was gone to Ranger School. And one night we hear all this tossing and stirring of stuff and all this stuff. And my roommate Todd and I were terrified. We're like, what is going on next door? And finally, the door he opens the door because remember we had to keep it unlocked. He looks into our room and with the light on, and we see this like 6'4", 200 and plus pound African American guy, right? He's really buff, looked like a NFL football player, and he goes, "Who are you?" And slams the door shut, and we're like, "Ah!" So here we are, years later, both majors, and he comes back. He becomes the S3 of pushes me. If you're on here, Les, I love you and I forgive you. But yeah, and so I didn't get the critical job that would have kept me in the civil affairs battalion when I needed the job, and so I went on a different path. So I got sent to Kuwait, and that was a great job. Actually, it was a great job. What I thought was a bad thing, it was actually better for me. I ended up spending 15 months, almost 18 months, 18 months in Kuwait. And I was the deputy director for host nation affairs there, worked with an amazing guy named Mark Alexander. Um, uh, and because my job was paid for by the Kuwaitis, I was treated as a Kuwaiti major. And so I had the opportunity to live off post, had my own 5-bedroom villa. I had my own a brand new Tahoe. I had access to everywhere. I had an office in the Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense and at Camp Arif John. I oversaw like the Kabari crossing, would fly to Al Asad, do different. It was an amazing result. Really um, using my skills that I'd learned in negotiation and mediations to resolve conflict and solve problems. Just really solve problems that seemed unachievable, and people were amazed by it because you just stopped. And I think also as a believer, understanding how to this is critical. And this is for someone not listening to respond, but actually listening to hear what the other person is trying to communicate, right? Because in that, if you're able to not listen and just to respond, that you're actually able to listen to hear, then what you're able to do is take what you hear, take a breath, and go, okay, what are they really trying to say? Or is the deal really dead, or do we need to work? Do we need to work on the opposite? And this was always from American, United States, 51% position, right? But you could work some conflict out, and being able to resolve a bunch of things. It was amazing. And also, I befriended a Kuwaiti prince over there, who, just an amazing guy. Actually, the DCO was like, "Hey, Kelly, do you know how to fish?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know how to fish." And I'm thinking fishing, right? Fishing. But then I have to meet this sheikh at this marina, and then we get on his yacht to go fishing. But it was really just him wanting to build relationship with U.S. forces because of his father. You know what I mean? Play to play, not anything illegal, but it was just a matter of um, really understanding U.S. forces position here and how his family and because of where they were. His father was at the time the seventh eldest Al Sabah in the nation, and so he had a minor position within the military, but he had a major um, position in the Ministry of Minerals, and part of that was directly related to the waste that was coming out of Iraq from U.S. forces, right? And so and how it was affecting Kuwait proper. But I say all that was I met amazing people, had some of the best workers within our office, soldiers that I'm still friends today with. And I hope they get to see some of this. Yeah, um, just some amazing people. And so then I came back after that, understanding that operational pictures of civil affairs. I went back to Third Special Forces Group, and I was assigned to Third Special Forces Group as the um, first field grade officer assigned to the staff of a Special Forces Group. Does that make sense? So at that time, because civil affairs had been one battalion, now we've created a brigade. We've expanded to 4 battalions, and they were looking at this was before the 85th, the conventional forces was come online. Um, they were expanding every growth for the war on terror. They were growing civil affairs. We were growing as a branch, and if you can imagine, I was only one of 12 officers in my grade in all of active duty civil affairs, right? And so I was assigned to third, and believe it or not, in the MTO, the DCO didn't even know that the S9 was a primary staff officer under the band of the MTO. He didn't know, and so I was assigned to a major in the S3 in the room of misfit toys, and and uh, and so I literally had to, you know, present to the DCO my capability statement, what I'm able to do for you as a command. I'm just not the relation guy. I can provide you a civil affairs concept of military support. Civil military concept of support. Um, uh, be part of the plan, and it was unique. And so then we deployed back to Afghanistan. Now this time I'm the J9. Also unique. Will, you'll like this. I was part of the original working group of the first special operations female engagement teams. So you think of like, smoke-filled rooms, in a back office up in, USASOC G3, and they're going, oh, the Marines have this female element, but because in Afghanistan, 68% of the populace is female, we have no access to it. How do we access this? Because when we're doing operations, because of their culture, we're violating a lot of the WASTA, the good rapport we would have, because how do we search? You know what I mean? And JSOC, USASOC didn't have that capability. And so I was part of the original working groups to develop that. And you'd be shocked. They were, again, they were like, should we issue weapons? What's their job? And fighting for them to go, hey, they need to be man trained, equipped, communicate and survive, just like the operators are going to be with. And so getting them equipped and then working to get them the quality training at SWIC that they needed to be successful on the battlefield. And so I oversaw the first, basically the first 3 rotations: man, train, equip, deploy. I oversaw them while down range. I had a really great N2IC with me, former civil affairs master sergeant, that really helped. Because they really thought they were just going to be these social, cultural advisors. But the reality is we were sending women to go live with 30 plus guys, at a Kalat, in the middle of Afghanistan. It was amazing. But finished that tour. That was just another unique opportunity. And part of it was understanding training, making sure they were trained to standard, taking the time to train them, deploy them. And then I really enjoyed the job that I had as the J9, and was able to paint the picture for the commander there of our concept support. And then after that, came back to the schoolhouse. I was the XO at the 3rd Battalion SWIC, had an amazing commander there, man of God, Colonel Howell, Brian Howell, who's amazing. There was another commander at the 95th named Scott Story, another amazing man of God. They were great leaders. I'm not, they were great. Everyone had their portions, competitiveness, like a guy named Jim Brown, um, James Brown, Jim Brown, JB. He was a great leader. Um, yeah, great, great leadership. I would say the only thing we missed was mentorship. Like the not uh, because we're going places that we had never been, never had the really understood my left and right limits of how I could communicate need. It was kind of like I believe God was going to work it out. God works all things out for good for those who love Him. You know, and so um, I would. But yeah, so took the job at Swick. Um, had a turn of events there that the leader, the SF leader of the training group, maxed out his profile, and um, yeah. So even though I'm just humbly saying this, I was the number one officer in the battalion, in my battalion, and my boss gave me a above center mass. The senior rater on my first look for battalion command did not give me a above center mass because he had maxed his profile out. And under not having the mentorship, I didn't understand I should go up a level. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want to hurt command or anything. I didn't go up and get an open door policy and go, hey, how can the NCR, the OAR say this, and and this is my first look for lieutenant colonel, which will affect battalion command. And I'm not saying that I would be a battalion commander. I'm not. Could I have been? Was I aspiring to be? Yes. But again, it was a very steep, and there were great officers. There were great officers within my year group, above and below, and all of them that got command deserved command. I'm not saying that at all. But it limited my uh, um, I believe limited my chance for battalion command. Um, and then also what rolled around was I had to leave my job as the XO of the battalion because my time was over, and I was a very senior, um, and I didn't understand profile. That again goes back to mentorship, and so um, the bosses that I knew at the 95th Civil Affairs wanted me to come back, and they offered me a job. Hey, this is what you'll do, all this, and then I had a job offered up at Corps. And all I would say is that I didn't understand that because they promised I was getting frocked, they were going to frock me early for the job that I was going to do at brigade. And uh, when you have a pool of like 16 lieutenant colonels to compete in as a new, you know, and he was changing command and a pool of 45, right? I would have been much competitor as the deputy Corps G9 than the S9 of the Civil Affairs Brigade in my first OER because I would have had, and so I just, for those out there, when you're making decisions, life decisions on promotion, where, make sure you get mentorship. The scripture says that there's safety in the multitude of wise counsel, right? You have your emotions, you think what you should do, but I say always stop and get counsel. Also, if you're having counsel with your wife, if you guys aren't in unity, don't move, right? Um, there it says where there's unity, God commands His blessing, right? And I would rather have a blessing follow me because I'm unified than have no blessing when I move out not unified. Does that make sense?
Amen.
And so I just say that always,
Said
Will?
amen.
Yeah. And so I just say get mentorship, find mentorship. Um, yeah. Mentors will see people that can be mentored, but really mentees find mentors. And that's why I say like General Fontaine or General Wharton or, um, there's guys that are in my life that are my mentors that I can go to and ask questions, and I'm not afraid of their answers. They're going to, they're going to ask me what my thought life, what I've been thinking about, what my, what my financial life is, what's my spiritual life. Are you staying fit? Those types of things, right? They're asking these questions because they want to make sure that I'm always growing, that I'm always, striving to move forward as a man. And so another unique opportunity. I left after that job. I'm getting close to the end of my career. I ended up going to Korea for the first time. Amazing time. I'm glad I went when I did. And so I was assigned as the G9, the primary staff officer for the 2nd Infantry Division. And when I went there, I was able to present. I was taught, like I was in the schoolhouse, always give your um, capability support brief. Go in and, hey, I'm Kelly. You have an office call with the boss, the chief of staff. You say, hey, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to provide. I can provide for you. This is what I know to do. And when I did that with the chief of staff, who was an armor officer, and then ultimately what I did with the general, who was he was a field artillery officer, Major General Vandal. He would be the 8th Army commander. Was like, you can do that? And I'm like, yes, sir, I can. He's like, okay, you know what? There's one thing I've wanted since I've been here, and nobody has given it to me. I want an engagement strategy. I'm like, okay, sir. He's like, when do you want it? He's like, just get me a draft. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I know who to work with. So I go get with the PSYOPs officer. I go with the information officers, and I'm like, hey, I'm Kelly, and I'm the boss. The boss said, hey, he needs an engagement strategy. And so within a week, so there had been all the G9s prior not beating them up, because this is what we were relegated to, because we never worked at the operational level. We were assigned to the operational level, but we were never required to do operational work, because the operational commanders who were coming out of Iraq, Afghanistan, that generation, and even before, they only saw the civil affairs attached because there was one battalion to the SF. And maybe they got reserve guys, but those guys went out and did, made sure that, cemeteries and wells and projects, and, but they couldn't paint a picture. And so, and that's what we did within a week. A couple of amazing guys, and along with our staffs together, we produced the general's first engagement strategy. And we quickly, even though we were able to sync all the events, everything that was being done, to a message, to a strategy that actually came all the way back from the quadrennial review, the strategic planning process, the defense security strategy, all these strategic documents. We were able to filter them all down to what actually we wanted to do on the peninsula at the division level. And it was amazing. And he actually started to have fun, because, believe it or not, we ended up having like, I think it was like 46 versions of it. Keep tweaking it, keep changing it. No, I like this. I change this. But we finally got an approved proctor. If you can imagine being a primary staff officer, right, in a division, and not even having, so we had a bunker, right? We had a bunker in the side of a mountain, right? That was, in the event of war, we were supposed to go to. Imagine whether we did an outdoors CCP, contingency command post, or in the bunker, you don't even have a table. You don't have any computer. They don't have a space for you, because you never being able to change that, be able to change the paradigm of, literally having to convince the Division G3 that you can do a concept of military support for the defense of Korea, or understand global force management, right? I don't know if you got into that at all, Will, but being able to take the strategic plan and say, actually, we need these forces from here, and this is where they, based on the plan that's always being updated, this is where they need to go, right? And they're like, wow, you're able to provide this, and this is where we've grown as civil affairs folks, I believe, over the time since I was there. And finally, kind of wrapping it all, divine favor, really divine favor. I wasn't, um, you know, I want to, again, divine favor while I was there, the boss, because of the performance we had as a section and with the other, the MISO guy and the IO team. Um, uh, um, they offered me, there was a command that was opening there in Korea. It was a CSL select job, and the guy was only going to do 1 year. They offered me that command. They said, "Hey, do you want to take over this battalion command?" And we prayed hard, and but by this time it's 2015. So had been doing Army stuff basically since 1988. And so it was kind of like had a daughter, one son in college, daughter senior year in high school, and then another son freshman, sophomore year in high school. And it's like, do we, do we, do I do another year here in Korea? And so I turned it down. It was a hard, the boss was like, you sure? You know? Um, and then, no, and then they actually I got offered another command down near Pusan. It was an ESC job. It was a HHB, another HHB battalion. Um, they were looking for somebody to fill that, and I turned that down too, because I'd made the decision never sacrifice your family, because that critical moment with, you know, my son in college, daughter senior year, she, very blessed. One daughter. We also did later an adoption. So I had one daughter who was, into pageantry, Miss North Carolina, collegiate, competed at the national level. Jeremy's on a full ride naval ROTC scholarship. Youngest son's doing amazing in high school. Our other daughter was a three-peat national track champion that we adopted. Um, and so it was like, no, need to come home. And so the last assignment that I had was I was the deputy deputy G34 fires um, for the Army Central Command, and that was a great job, great bosses. Ended up having I was a geo bachelor, so I bought a car with 26 miles on it. In 2 years, I put 187,000 miles on it. Driving one way, it was 154 miles, and I would drive that uh, minimum 3 times a week um, to come home. I did have a place to stay. Another leader that I knew from Fayetteville, I got to stay down there. But when he was TDY, whatever, I didn't stay there, and so yeah, and because of life, everything that was going on, right, I would just drive home, get off work, drive home, get up early, drive to work. Um, yeah, but it was amazing. They offered me, hey, double ACOM, get. I was there 2 years, so I got ACOMs the first year. The second year, they're like, hey, we'll give you another ACOMs, and then we'll put you, for you to get promotable, we'll assign you to the SGS. You become the SGF for a 3-star command. You're working directly for the 1-star. You'll get get a great, you potentially get a great OER there. Work for him, get another, ACOM to compensate the, OERs before. Because I had only, I got an OER for 4 months, 5 months as a lieutenant colonel. So in the 95th, and then I got um, the when I was in Korea, because I was a non-CSL Select senior staff member, even though I did a good job. I was told I did an amazing job. I couldn't compete with battalion commanders, CSL Select staff, and so got the OER, I got there, and yeah, and it was a great job. Like I said, 18 trips in 2 years. Also, I was the deputy commander of the 3-star contingent command post, which was we deployed to Kuwait, we deployed to Jordan to set up this command post, uh, and but yeah, it was a great time. But the grace had lifted, and why I stayed, actually, why I didn't retire as a major. Um, Branch called me. I had submitted my paperwork to retire in 2012, and they called me and they were like, after I didn't get the ACOM OER, and they called me and they're like, "Hey, we got your retirement paperwork, and like, is there a job you want or anywhere you want to go in the Army so we can keep you past lieutenant colonel?" And I was like, "Are you telling me I'm going to make lieutenant colonel?" They're like, "No, but like, if you take all commands from the tower, um, things are going to look really good for you." I was like, "Am I going to make battalion command?" They're like, there's like 32 guys competing for 2 commands. It's like, oh, we can't say that. And so, and then there, um, I said, I pulled my retirement back and I came out on the promotion list. And so then with that, you remember the rule, um, you got to do a year in the grade to retire at the grade. And then you got to retire. So it takes 10 months to get selected, 8 months to get selected. And then you got to do a year in the grade, then 3 in the grade to retire at the pay, And so by that time it was like, I was already at RCENT, and I was like, okay, I'll just retire out of Army Central Command and go to the house and eat oats. And the other unique thing I'd like to say, is I know we're getting close to the end, is um, through this whole process, Laura and I, because God radically healed our marriage many years before actually coming out of Egypt, um, we began to focus on marriages. We began to love on people, and for many years we've been like family life counselors. We've ministered to hundreds of couples and individuals on marriage and parenting. Um, we've done conferences, been invited to church to do conferences and those types of things. And 2000, my last time to Afghanistan, they started requiring people to be credentialed. And so in 2010, I was ordained, as a lay pastor at our church here in Fayetteville, Covenant Love Church. And so, yeah, and then being a lay pastor, and um, done everything from marriages to weddings, you know, everything, everything in between. Uh, um, as a pastor, as a lay pastor, but just I love teaching people. Going back to that whole teaching idea of getting people to understand how to be synced. How the sequence of living a right. A more. I'm not. Please hear me. I don't want to sound judgmental. A more. There's words like flourishing, right? There's words like peaceful, less chaotic, right? Um, Everyone understands that there's cycles of life, right? It seems like family. We call them family life patterns, right? There were patterns in my life growing up that everything was good for about 4 months, and then there was a knockout, drag out, a makeup season, and then go good, the knock, there was the same cycle, right? Things would go well, I'd be doing well, and either I would get lazy and get critique, whatever it is, right? Stop my PT, whatever it may be, and then, oh, hey, might lose my job because I can't pass, I'm on the, you know, I can pass the PT test and I pass the height and weight. I mean, I pass the tape, but I'm not actually the standard. And here you are, this guy saying you have all these special skills, you're special operations, but you can be a doughboy. You know what I mean? And it's like, No, if you're excellent and you're a person of excellence and you desire to be excellent, uh, at your craft, then okay, you need to take care of yourself, and so you need to do the right thing. And so um, I just, I just add that because uh, that helped. That really being within that community and being able to help people, steward people well, understanding how to cherish your wife and uh, learn your wife, your children, how to speak to them, how to gain your emotional intelligence, right? Um, uh, to treat people the way they want to be treated, actually hear their stories and understand their, empathize with them, and not just um, uh, utilize them for your own advantage. And in that, I was able to um, go back again and get a master's in business management and leadership. Last year, I was working on my doctorate in business administration. You know, um, keep learning, keep learning. One of my mentors, longtime mentors, 20 years plus of almost 25 years of mentorship, a 3-war veteran. You know, um, you know, got put got in trouble. His dad was a cobbler, and he did the boots for the local commander of the base and did the shoes for the local justice of the peace. He got in trouble, and so he was too young to go to the juvenile work camp, right? So his dad got him eligible at 15 years old to go to the local base into the Army Air Corps at 15. And within 4 months of being in the Army Air Corps, is shipped off to the Philippines, you know, to be air crew on a B-24, you know, and then stay in and then switch over to the Air Force and become the equivalent of a 3-star, um, equivalent of a 3-star uh, command master chief in the Air Force, right? But, did the World War II, was in the Korean War, 90 credits above 3 doctorates, and was always about keep learning, keep learning, keep growing, so you can be the best person to those that you may come in contact with. Um, Again, my wife says I have the gift of gab. I haven't allowed you even 5 seconds of really, even a minute of comments
All right. So, hey, this has been a
in
blast.
3 hours. In 3 hours of conversation.
I know. I love it. I love it. So if you'd like to support I put the QR code on the screen. You can put that. It takes it straight to my website. You can support there. We work off of donations. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, everybody. And also, look at there. If you are in
Penny.
need of bankruptcies, that's right. Call Penny. If you got bankruptcy issues, if you got the popo chasing you, make sure you call Penny. Penny A. Cox Esquire, attorney at law. She does international stuff, does it all. So give her a call. That's for sure. I tell you what, Kelly, it's been a long way from turd training back in 1994
Yep.
down at the Green Ramp. And that I talk about the crash day being as the worst day of my life. I'll never forget the things that happened out there and all the scenes that we dealt with. Um, I look, I didn't ask any of the questions that I wanted to ask. We've got to do a whole nother section because you just
Yeah,
went.
please.
We need to do a whole nother. We'll get together again because there's questions that I want to know about. Things like what was the
Yeah, I
darkest
should have.
day and growing up as a kid and different things. And I think there's value in doing that. So I want to
Yeah,
set up
edit.
another one.
Yeah, please. Edit this. Cut it, whatever you need to shorten it. What's kind of pertinent. We can. Yeah, you could cut. I'll wear the same outfit, and
No, no, no,
we
no.
can. We can.
No, it's not like that. What this is, listen, what we're trying to do is to do something that your grandkids are going to watch and be proud of,
Mm,
right? So that's
yeah.
the next thing I want to know is some stories about who loves you, who you love, Though we'll do it. We'll schedule it again. And but we're gonna do a second section with you because you're a special kind of guy. To me, you're a special kind of guy, and I'm sure to those who love you, you're a special guy too.
Yeah, I think my career. I mean, it's almost like a Forrest Gump. I kind of look at it as a Forrest Gump, but the way I wonder, again, like Sergeant Major saying, "I know what's going on. I'm going to give you this opportunity." And what you don't even know is that same day I lost my job. I kind of look at it this way. I lost my job and got a new opportunity, right? And then that same day I've been trying to um, uh, sell my Jeep, right? Well, the day that I left, I apologize. The day that I left the Advanced Airborne School, right? I'd been trying to sell my Jeep, right? And that day I left that job and then went home and somebody had called me to buy my Jeep. So, in literally the same day, I lost my job, got a new job, and then sold my Jeep and got a new car all in the same day. You know what I mean? Just an amazing kind of a wild, wild story. But yeah, I look forward to. Just tell me when you want to do the second event. I'll make sure that I'm free, and we'll really just focus. We'll say this is part 2, and we'll just go down the list of questions.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, don't go anywhere. I'm fixing to sign off, okay? But don't you go anywhere, Kelly. You stay with me. Okay, everybody. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. Yeah, it's been a blast. It's been a blast.
Marshall in the middle.